did it again. Hello. In a way, is very much a we must work to tear down systems that we think secretly treat people differently based on their skin color, and implementing systems that openly treat people differently based on their skin color. So it's in a way, people are very quick to throw around the idea of you know, conspiracy theory and stuff like that. But here we have a sort of left-wing conspiracy, if you want to put it that way. But it's a left-wing conspiracy where it's like, yeah, we don't actually know where the problem lies and like where we can do to actually fix it, but you know, it's a system. It's the whole system, right? And we have no real alternative and really no end game, and we'll talk about that later on. But like, so we secretly treat people differently. So we you know what we should do to fix that? We should treat people differently in the open based on skin color. That's gonna really cause like be a good solution there. Then we have one from Nathaniel Wright. He does the Rebel News podcast here in Canada. It says whether you are praised or maligned for gathering people together in Canada has to do with which god you are gathering them to worship. And this is in response to this rather large gathering, of which in Canada we're just not allowed to have large gatherings. This was a while ago too. This was like on June 25th. So it was like, what was that? Last week. It says here, watch. Montreal celebrates as the Habs eliminate Vegas and move on to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1993. But it's a big deal for people who are, you know, into hockey and stuff. And it's like, yeah, don't have any problem gathering for you know, back in last summer, BLM riots. Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford didn't have a problem gathering for like a sort of like a funeral type vigil. And then here we have a bunch of Canadians gathering together for hockey. So I don't really want to hear about that. Well, you know, the church is being treated like everyone else, and it's like, well, sure seems like if the crowd's big enough and it's for the right God, as Nathaniel was saying, then they'll let it go, right? There are many things in our culture that's more important than church, by a lot of people's estimation. Here's Paige Master saying, responding to Kevin Cosby here. Kevin says, white supremacy has always located Vodi Bakum, whose only purpose is to make racists feel confirmed and comfortable in their racism. He does not reflect Black America, and you know it. That is so awful. Brian Suave says, repent of this slanderous, ethnically schismatic accusation of a godly brother in Christ. You are reviling both Vodi and those who support him as racists. And we're actually going to read from his book tonight. That is Vodi Bakum's book. This is the kind of stuff that's going on in our culture, right? You have people who are actually calling each other racist for on no basis, but just you disagree with me politically, or you know, you don't buy into the CRT stuff. Yeah, that is reviling, and revilers go to hell. 1 Corinthians 5:11. And Page Master said, racism on full display from a Baptist pastor, and that's the problem, and that's why the SBC should have made concerted efforts to be specific and say, yes, we are against CRT, you know, as a convention. Of course, if you've been in the loop, you hear a whole lot about the plagiarism that went on with Litton, J.D. Greer, and Ed Litton. Gabriel says, a viewer named Jacob saw my tweet where Ed Litton says God whispers about sexual sin, just as J.D. Greer taught a year ago. And then he edited both Greer and Litton's sermons together, and they're really, really close. And I watched a few of these videos. There's now more than one. you know, it started there with the whispering about sexual sin, which is like, it's just, I don't know how you come to that conclusion. Like, if you read the scriptures, doesn't whisper about it. And besides, why, I don't know why, even if it, like Chris Holmholz makes an interesting point. Said, I remember when Richard Radio had shared two pastors who gave identical sermons on the one occasion. Turned out that they were using prepackaged sermons they bought. Can't help but think that this is probably the same thing. And so, it throws a lot of shade and a lot of suspicion on what's going on in the SBC and his new presidency, because like basically he took the sermon of the previous president and then started presenting it as his own, without naming it. So Steve Wedgeworth says, this stuff happens all the time. Little guys, big guys. Pastors, please be original. It's one thing to borrow a smart illustration or joke, but when you're imitating the outline and the main points, that's bad. Right, yeah. Like, reviewing that video is crazy, because it's, like, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, like, okay, look, they share similar outlooks on things, and they have similar teachers and find the same types of people useful, right? So I will tend to say things very similarly to, you know, another friend of mine who has a lot of similar beliefs, right? Like, okay, fine. But then when you actually like compare them sermon like right next to each other, you go, man, there's no denying that this is plagiarism. Like if it's one thing to have similar points, but like if you're gonna plagiarize, you gotta at least like hide it better. You gotta at least come with different points, and at the very least put the points in a different order. Like it's even in the same order. Just crazy stuff. We have here. He continues. Also, if you say one time I, but it's actually a borrowed illustration, well, that's basically just a lie. One more thing. Notice how one illustration of visiting an idol temple is attributed to Paul David Tripp. The same visit is attributed as a personal visit by the other pastor. Something similar happens with the whisper/shout line. One pastor cites Jen Wilkin for that expression. The other pastor just uses it as if it's his own. And you know, so this got into a whole discussion this past week over plagiarism and all that. And obviously, there's a certain point where if you keep saying something often enough, eventually it's not something that someone else has said. In a way, it kind of becomes something that you say, because something you say all the time. I think you can have a little bit of leeway there, but again, the phrasing and the how one-to-one the sermon is between the Greer and Litton really made things extra suspicious. So here's yeah, this is one here. This is a post from Christianity Today, who's gone really quite out there now. A school shooting survivor says, quote, "If you know and love Jesus and are going to spend eternity in heaven with him, why does the idea of not having guns anymore scare you so much?" That's a really bad argument, because that argument can be applied to anything. So like, I can say something like, if you know and love Jesus and are going to spend eternity in heaven with him, why is the idea of not having guns, sorry, why is the idea of everyone having guns scare you so much? Right? It's like, there's a lot more you could, like your argument can be used to defend anything. Well, I mean, if you know and love Jesus, you're going to spend eternity in heaven with him, why is the idea of blank scare you so much? Well, because there's a difference between those two things. There's a difference between not having guns and having guns and all that. So Charlotte Knox responded to that, and I thought very interestingly. He said, maybe she needs some good black history. Here's a good place to start. Colfax, Los Angeles massacre, or first law in VA, Virginia, I think, to mention African Americans. 1664 act that barred free blacks from owning firearms. Or act for the better ordering of Negroes and slaves. South with a SC. SC. South Carolina. South Carolina, 1712, Delaware instituted a law in December of 1831 that required free blacks to obtain a firearms license if they wished to have weapons. Same month, Maryland and Virginia passed laws that prohibited free blacks from carrying guns. And then GA is Georgia, I think. Right? Georgia, yep. Georgia soon followed, barring free blacks from firearm ownership entirely in 1833. So now, ask me again why I have a problem with this. Anything I miss? This person, what mage tour you want to add? So I didn't know about any of that. So Chocolate Knox here took this really bad argument that she lays down in a different direction than I would have taken it. But I think it's a very interesting information. You know, there was an idea. There was a time in American history where certain people were not allowed to have guns, and in this case, it was black people, barring free blacks from firearm ownership until entirely in 1833. And it's like, would she have used the same argument? Like, if you know and love Jesus and you're going to spend eternity in heaven with him, why does the idea of blacks not having guns scare you so much? Like that's what it's like. Well, because everyone needs to be able to defend themselves, not only from intruder but also from government encroachment, which is really the main intention of the Second Amendment. So an interesting little tidbit there. So we have more on the plagiarism thing here. Kofi says, in a Facebook group I'm in, folks are defending it on the grounds that pastors don't have to cite everything they quote like a paper. Sorry, but if you can't do your own homework, you shouldn't get in the pulpit. And then Jeff Wright responds, oh, good grief. That seems to indicate that many pastors in that group are doing something similar. Can we talk about this for a moment? Let's go for greater to lesser. Go from greater to lesser consequences in terms of consequences. Hello, Generated. Welcome. Welcome. Hopefully you're well. Apparently you're gonna... Oh, add. Hello, Sama Man. There we go. Hello, Regenerated. So apparently you're going to California soon? I saw on Twitter you were looking for someone to hopefully. Oh, okay. For what purpose? You don't mind me asking? Let's see here. Jeffrey Wright says, I was told Jerry Vines said, I milk a lot of cows, but I churn my own butter. Oh, to visit Sir Jahaziel. Reformed Baptist Pastors Conference. Oh shoot, he in LA? Yeah, I didn't know that. Nice. Also, hello Yoshi, welcome. Part of preparing well is reading and listening to faithful, helpful brothers. That isn't shameful, it is actually a good practice. I agree. Hello DJ Para, welcome. But you have to be clear about what you're doing publicly. I'm preaching. Based on what you guys see me do during these nights, I would definitely tend to agree with this because I'm always pointing out all these other people who are saying stuff, right? I know you're gonna ask them. These are good guys who you might never see their posts or whatever. So not everyone's on Twitter, which I definitely am understanding more and more these days, but I still find it very useful. I'm preaching through John right now. My church has heard me say, guys, I read John MacArthur's outline and it was better than mine, so I'm going with his. Or, you're going to hear me quote D.A. Carson a bunch this week because he's really helpful on this. Integrity says, to give credit where credit is due, and to be expressing gratitude for those who have helped you. Faithful preachers should be a fraternity, and that is a two-way street. Get help, give credit. That's all. Just be forthright. There are probably many reasons guys aren't doing this, and some may not be shady, but two I am aware of bemoan and don't know how to do anything about. 1. Cult of personality / celebrity ecclesiology, and 2. Pragmatism push that guys do to stuff like this. So, a few examples. How am I doing, DJ? I'm doing very well. It's sometimes hard to find time to stream right now, but I'm enjoying myself. I'm enjoying the summer. Where I am now, the cherry tree has come in beautifully. I've had so many cherries the last little while. It's been wonderful. Managed to stop the birds from eating the cherries, which happens every year, but this time coming in nicely. So I've heard. So I bought a device that scares birds away, so like they couldn't eat the cherries, and then now it's like, oh, the tree's like heavy with cherries. Beautiful. Let's see. Some of us, note us, me included, aren't as gifted as other brothers. I'm just not Steve Lawson or HB Charles or whoever. And yeah, I feel that way sometimes too. Where like a lot of what I've learned, like, I don't know all the stuff that I know because it's just me. It's like I was taught these things, or I learned these things from other people, right? So you see Bolt's tweet on SBC seminaries. The one about like not being okay with recommending SBC seminaries anymore. I think that was him. Yeah. And I can understand them. I mean, yeah. I mean, because did you see that video, Rajan, of the clip of the guy? Oh, it was so crazy. It was the most unbelievable thing to me. The guy who goes up to the mic during the SBC the SB conference or convention, and he asks the people on stage. He asks, "Hey, was on Litton's website, and it has this partialism thing there. What does Southern Seminary teach about this? Does it teach this thing on his website?" And then Mueller comes up and is like, "Well, I don't know what it says, but I trust Litton." And it's like, okay, but it doesn't really answer the question. And JD Greer comes up and he goes, "Please make sure that all your questions are related to the SBC, or related to Southern Seminary, and if you're directing them toward Albert Mueller." And then Ed Litton comes up right after that guy, and you think like, okay, it was right. Ed Litton comes up after that guy, and you think I was willing to be given the benefit of the doubt, right? I was like, okay, great, this is perfect. Here comes the new president. He's gonna clarify this question and be like, okay, great. Hey, let me ask you a question now. I was mistaken. I misspoke. I meant to say XYZ. And it was the most like leftist Democrat answer. It was so nuts. It was like, "Hey, Albert Mueller, you're great. You're just the good dude, and I just thought it was wonderful that you're just a good person." And then Albert Mueller comes up, and he's like, "No, you're the best, Litton, and we honor you as your new president," right? And it's like, Mueller has a lot of clout, right? And so he could have still said, "No, yeah, no, you're the best guy. Nah, yeah." Yeah, it's like just like a flattery competition. "No, you're breathtaking." Yeah, that's right. And it was just like, dude, you could have just been like, "Hey, we honor you as the new president," and all that. And then Albert Mueller could have been like, "Now, that said, go ahead and answer this man's question, because he clearly had a good question that to you." But no, instead Mueller was just like, "You get finger guns, yeah, you go, bro, you're the best. No, you're the best, Albert Mueller." And that was the whole exchange. I couldn't believe it. when I saw it, I was just like, there's no way that's it. There's no way. There's gotta be, gotta be like a cut somewhere or something. But no, but it I don't know. It moved on. So you're breathtaking. Reverse Uno card. Your mom. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what it was. It was like your mom. You stick around for now. Lucky baby. Have a good stream, man. I'll pop later if you're still in. Yeah, man. Rajan, thank you so much for coming by. The clip was actually was depressing. It was mind blowing. It was depressing. But I thought it was very helpful as well, right? And as much as man, because the thing that's so hard about it, especially with Albert Mohler, is that he was like the Tom Askell of his time, right? Like back in the '90s, he was like the guy who was like standing in the gap and stopping the leftward drift, right? And then he's like, and now it's like, what's going on? Like, why is it that most people who voted for Mohler went for Litton? And then it's like. And then the whole plagiarism thing happened, and like everyone's just mums the word on that. All the usual suspects in like the upper echelons of the SBC. And it's what's going on? Like, just be honest. I'll be quick to forgive, right? If Litton had just said, I plagiarized this sermon, and this one, and this one, and this one, like 4 sermons, and I shouldn't have, and I want to repent to you. And like, don't give any excuses. Just say that. Just repent. I'd be like, yeah, okay, great. Let's move on from that. But the fact that Litton and SBC people, right, will like constantly do like Democratic playbook stuff, where it's like they'll scrub the website and they'll delete all their videos on YouTube, or they'll make them private, and then they'll be like, what videos? Huh? What? Huh? I don't know what you're talking about. And they gaslight you. And it's like, what are you doing? Just say you're sorry. Just apologize. Just ask for forgiveness from your brothers, and we'll forgive you, and we'll move on from there. But like this constant need to like double down when you're wrong, and just dig your heels in. I don't know, but it was helpful. I thought the clip was depressing, some man, but it was helpful to see. It's a clearer picture of kind of what's going on, you know? Anyway. I'm just not Steve Lawson or H.B. Charles or whoever. If, however, I feel like I have to be because I want a stage comparable to theirs, the internet gives me a chance to literally replicate their sermons with some reasonable hope my people won't find out. Pastors who think A, they need a big attendance church for whatever reason, and B, the way to get that is to be as compelling in the pulpit as more gifted brothers are tempted to just take the more gifted brothers' sermon, hoping the pixie dust will sprinkle their own ministry. And that's kind of what I do here as well, right? Like I want to tell you guys, like, hey, check out all these useful people. He's saying useful things that can help you. Because I've been helped by these people. So I compile these things on my Twitter feed. And it's like, hey guys, check this out. This might be help you too. I don't really pretend that they're my own words, right? Over time, you know, obviously I learn my own stuff, and I learn from all these men, and in time, they kind of become part of my normal presentation about certain things, right? So, you know, you guys have heard me talk about, you know, a little bit of post-millennialism, or like taxation, or about theonomy, or something like that, right? And those are not my own original ideas. Those are ideas I got that you guys have been following for a while probably can glean where I've gotten those ideas from, right? Looking at Doug Wilson and Rush Dooney and like Gary DeMar and David Chilton, like all these people that I recommend. Joe Boot, of course. Bodie. So, like, those are a handful that I've been helped by. I think it would be helpful to other Christians to learn about stuff from them as well. So, I never want to pretend that I'm like some savant that where I just have come up with all these ideas on my own, and I want to point you guys to things that have helped me. I think that in pointing you to them, they also will help you. No, I'm just a link in the chain, but I think what Jeff Wright is saying here is saying that, you know, there are a certain the cult of personality, right, in celebrity Christianity. Like there is a very human part of us that says like a fallen human part of us that says like, well, I want to be the one who comes up with all these ideas and all these illustrations and be the kind of person that people look to for answers. Definitely appreciate your author recommendations. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you do. I had a very different outlook on things before I started reading some other stuff. So, Steve Gregg's Revelation 4 Views, great book. I recommend that one too. Now let's see here. Confidence in the word is a great remedy for this, but pragmatism and cult of personality / celebrity Christianity undermines this confidence greatly. There's more than one way this goes down too. I met a guy in Nashville who was a research writer for some big platform pastors. He didn't tell me which, and I didn't ask. He was a gifted young dude with a sharp mind. He read, researched, and wrote, then sent off something the big names would tweak and polish and preach. And of course, that's another thing too. Like I said, right? You can be a sharp-minded person, but the truly sharp-minded person doesn't rely on just himself for those concepts and ideas. Like you become a sharp-minded person when you are well-read, and when you take all these ideas of other people. Right? We stand on the shoulders of giants. I forget who said that, but the idea is not that you're not an island, but rather there are people who come before you, brilliant men who you can go to, and you can like formulate a sharper mind by reading widely, and seeing how other men gained their sharpness. Right? There's very few men in the world who gain their sharpness of mind just by being born with it. Theologian, Weird Snake PogChamp. Good to see you, brother. Liking your tweets, man. I saw you were back on. You're back on Twitch as well. Back on doing a little bit of streaming. I know that's been for a lot of us. Streaming has been hard to find time to do it. So, how you doing, man? God bless. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that explains the Greer-Lytton sermon thing. Yes, and it could have copied JD. It could also be that the same research assistant was supplying both of these guys. It would explain why one quotes Jen Wilkins and the other does not, for example. In this way, JD might want to highlight Jen as a friend or whatever, if say, she was the research assistant. I'm back like Arnold Schwarzenegger in T2. I am back. Gene Ho Yoon as well. Welcome back. Look at that gold mask. I forgot you had that. Welcome back, buddy. Hopefully you're well. I don't know. I'm not sure if Gene Ho has been streaming too much either. I know that I haven't been on Twitch very much to watch streams. I've tried to catch a little bit of who like when Sir Jaziel, or when I think Super Shadow was streaming a little bit earlier last week. Marriage prep makes you busy. That's right. That's right. I mean, 2 months is not that long when it comes to all the preparation needed. Matthew USA, welcome. Welcome to the inner circle. Ugh. Ed would feel less need to do so. TBC. What's TBC? TBC, all I'm doing here is showing how using the same researcher can lead to something what we saw in the video. How we get JD's story turned into Paul Tripp's wouldn't fit that paradigm, obviously. Here's another way this stuff happens. It can be presented to preachers as a faithful way to steward their time. No joke. I was once in a meeting for young pastors where the pastor of a super duper big box church in my state told those of us assembled to learn that we should take Craig Rochelle's sermon series, sermon art, etc., and preach them at our churches. He said, do that for the important sections of the church year, i.e., when people are in... Keeps going at the top. I.e., when people were in town. He contrasted this with doing your own thing during the summer when everyone was traveling. We just got our offer accepted on a house, so that's extra busy. Whoa, a house too? Dude! Amazing, congratulations. This guy said that it freed up time for him to get the vision and lead his staff. It hurt my stomach. But this was presented as good counsel from an older, or perhaps I should say, successful pastor that young guys should emulate. No, I'm not kidding. I could go on with details about that meeting. An obsession with numbers, pragmatism, and the cult of personality ecclesiology it breeds has screwed up a whole lot in evangelical churches. And again, this is why I always say Christians shouldn't be pragmatists. I'm not sure where I got that one, but it's something that eventually I've kept saying so often it kind of became one of my own sayings, right? Pragmatism is not Christianity. So basically it's in the way of saying the ends does not justify the means. So you shouldn't do something just because it really seems like the most effective method. So the most effective method and the most moral method are not always the same thing. The Greer-Litton video is a small sample of that. The same problem is why two men preached that God whispered about a fashionable sin, and also why two churches didn't pitch a holy fit about it being said in the pulpits. Pragmatism has killed our doctrinal integrity as well as our practical integrity. Like the people on Jonah's boat away from Nineveh, we will throw anything. Unfashionable doctrines, owning our errors, even doing our own level best to serve the Lord and our people with the gifts and resources we have, then trusting God to do what only He can. The world is watching, makes pragmatists do what the world wants. Right, because, see, that's such an interesting thing. Because the intention... Yeah, he's getting married in September, Theologian. He's been a busy man. The world is watching, makes you pragmatists do what the world wants. So buried within that saying, the world is watching, which was like the catch cry of the SBC, this past SBC, is very deceptive, and it's like the world is watching. Yeah, the world's watching. Therefore, we should be a good witness, and we should obey Christ, right? And because the world's watching us, they should watch us obeying Christ. But the way it was twisted is like the world's watching, therefore we should not do anything the world would not like. Yeah, very strange. I gotta sleep as well. It's super late over here. Might listen later to the video. Not as fun though. Yeah, I understand. The streaming live is fun because you get to interact and stuff. But have a good sleep, man. Sama man, I appreciate you coming by. God bless. And you know what? Ambition in pastors freaks out when the world isn't watching and wants it to start desperately. So desperately, in fact, that otherwise good men will do some really ridiculous things to try and get more eyes on the stream, more ears on the podcast, and more butts in the seat. And that's the thing. I know that there are ways to get my viewership up, and do this or do that, and it's like, well, don't really necessarily want to do those things, right? Like, if you want to be a big shot in the eyes of the world, you got to do and say a lot of things that you wouldn't choose to do and say. I hope Ed and JD will own this, like I wish Ed had with the thing with his church confession, or like I wish JD had with his whispers about sin nonsense, or his homosexuality doesn't send you to hell nonsense. Like that's the the phrase that keeps being like thrown around, this homosexuality doesn't send you to hell. How do I know that? Because heterosexuality doesn't send you to heaven. And it's like, that's dumb. Like, our sins send us to hell, and homosexuality is a sin, right? Heterosexuality is not a sin. So heterosexuality doesn't send you to heaven, but heterosexuality is not a sin. And if we love and serve Lord Jesus Christ, we're going to try to obey him. Jesus said, "Why do you call me Lord when you don't do what I say? He who loves me will keep my commandments." Like, it's not complicated in terms of understanding it. Obviously, we have to rely on the Holy Spirit to give us the strength to overcome very different temptations and sinful proclivities that we find within ourselves. But in terms of understanding what God's saying, it's not that complicated. We want to complicate it because we want to change what he said. So I don't think they will, though, because it appears big platform guys think admitting they goofed up or got help from some specific people is not the way to maintain their big platform. It is a shame all the way around. And yeah, that's what it basically comes down to. It feels like it's like you just don't want to admit that you got something wrong, because you're afraid that, I don't know, that it'll hurt your platform. That is a very unbiblical way of looking at wrongdoing, you know, and it's similar to a parent with a child. I think it's really our natural inclination is to never apologize to our children, and to always come with an excuse as to why you said what you said or did what you did. And because you think that if you just flat out said, "I'm sorry for, like, I did this, please forgive me, I was wrong," there's a sense in which you feel like, oh, well, if I do that, I'll be in a weak position. I'll be weakening myself. And, you know, my kids won't respect me if I am putting myself in this kind of lowly position. But actually the opposite is true. You know, you get a lot more respect from people when you're willing to say, "Wow, you know, I was wrong. I messed up, and I have no excuses I can give. That was just, I thought I could take a shortcut, or I was being selfish, or whatever," right? And you actually gain more respect from that. And you see the same principle in play in Scripture. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. If you humble yourself, then you'll be lifted up. Yes, very good, yeah. So get used to that, to asking for forgiveness. And people will naturally, I say naturally, people will just be drawn to you more. Even though, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Jesus himself, right? Any one of us would have thought, man, it would be inappropriate for Jesus to, you know, put on the servant's garments, right, and wash his disciples' feet. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And what's he doing that? And even his disciples, one of the disciples was aghast at the idea. And it's like, may we be so humble as to not look at any kind of service to our brothers, and humility before our brothers, and say, well, this is beneath me. I'm too good to apologize to somebody. But good words from Jeff right there. So let's continue here. Some more. There's one from Serpentine Rambler, or Brazen Hisser, is his at. It says here. I thought this was interesting. So, Foreign embassies don't fly the flags of their host nations because the embassy is foreign soil and does the business of the foreign nation's politics. This is the same reason national flags don't belong in Christian sanctuaries. The kingdom has its own political agenda. That's interesting. Interesting thoughts there, you know? Because it's true that, like, even in Canada, there's a rule that says you can have flags in the sanctuary, but the flag cannot be above the pulpit. Because the idea is that, like, it can't be behind or above or, like, elevated higher in the room than the pulpit is. And it's interesting, you know, how that sort of idea kind of was carried on even in, you know, through the colonies of the British Empire at the time, which is what Canada is. Yeah, something that my old pastor told me. Yeah, there's like rules in Canada about like what the flags, like where flags can go. But one of them is like, yeah, you can't have any nation's flag that's like more important than where the pulpit is. So yeah, a little holdover, right? A little holdover from our Christian roots, right? He continues, now, if you want to put the flags of all the nations in the foyer, and the Christian flag in every nation-state's civil government buildings, we can explore that. Wink. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, I didn't even know there was a Christian flag. There technically is a Christian flag. Actually, you can pull it up. It was... yeah. Yeah, there it is. So it's the flag right here, and it's flying. This is flying outside of the Focus on the Family headquarters in Colorado, and it's supposed to represent. I think it was like the red represents the blood of Christ, and the white represents purity, and the blue represents some. Let's say here. So the Chilean flag does it. I wonder how it came to be officially. Yeah, it says right here. The Christian flag was first conceived on September 26th, 1897. So it was just before the turn of the century, at Brighton Chapel on Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York, in the United States. The superintendent of Sunday School, Charles C. Overton, gave an impromptu lecture to the gathered students because the scheduled speaker had failed to arrive for the event. He gave a speech asking the students what a flag representing Christianity would look like. Overton, interesting. I wonder if it's related to the Overton window. Overton thought about his improvised speech for many years afterward. In 1907, he and Ralph Diffendorfer, secretary of the Methodist Young People's Missionary Movement, designed and began promoting the flag. So just under 100 years ago. With regard to this Christian symbolism of the Christian flag, the ground is white, representing peace, purity, and innocence. In the upper corner is a blue square, the color of the unclouded sky, emblematic of heaven, the home of the Christian, also a symbol of faith and trust. In the center of the blue is the cross, the ensign and chosen symbol of Christianity. The cross is red, typical of Christ's blood. The ecumenical organization Federal Council of Churches, now succeeded by the National Council of Churches and Christian Churches together, adopted the flag on 23rd of January 1942, 45 years after unofficial use since 1897. The Federal Council of Churches represented Baptist, Brethren, Eastern Orthodox, Episcopal, Methodist, Moravian, I'm not sure what that is, Lutheran, Oriental Orthodox, Polish National Catholic, Presbyterian, Quaker, and Reformed traditions, among others. The Christian flag intentionally has no patent, as the designer dedicated the flag to all of Christendom. Fanny Crosby wrote the words to a hymn called "The Christian Flag," with music by R. Huntington Woodman. Like the flag, the hymn is also free to use. On the Sunday nearest 26th September 1997, the Christian flag celebrated its 100th anniversary. So, it's again, this is news to me. I didn't know about this. Let me look at the Chile flag. Oops. Oh yeah, I see. It's like a red and white. It's with a star. Yeah. Whoop. That's what DJ was saying. Why she was saying it looked like it. It's very similar. Similar colors. They're sort of like pattern, right? The symbol up in the top left. So yeah. So yeah, I don't know like who uses this flag because I've never like heard of it until now. So I thought it was interesting to learn about it. Anyone can use it because it's not patented. It's not like copywritten, so you could just put it on anything. Down here it says there's even like a pledge to it. Because you know how like the Americans have like a pledge allegiance to the flag. Well, there's like a Christian sort of version where it's like, the first pledge was written by Lynn Harold Hugh, a Methodist minister who had heard Ralph Diffendorfer, secretary of the Methodist Young People's Missionary Movement, promoting the Christian flag at a rally. He wrote the following pledge: I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one brotherhood uniting all mankind in service and in love. And then some more conservative evangelical, Lutheran, Adventist, and Baptist churches and schools may use an alternate version of the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one Savior crucified, risen, and coming again with life and liberty for to all who believe. I like that one the best. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it doesn't have a very long history, but yeah, so Brazen History here is just saying, like, you know, if we want to talk about putting all the nation's flags in the foyer. Oh, really? Interesting. I didn't know that. Matthew says our church does the second pledge for our kids club. Oh, so interesting. So you actually like have knowledge of the Christian flag and stuff like that. That's interesting because, I mean, maybe it seems odd to people, but I mean, nations have flags, and because something kind of bothers me about the American like pledge, the Pledge of Allegiance, because it's like my allegiance is not really to America, as good as America can be as a nation, and had its Christian beginnings as a nation. My allegiance ultimately is not to America, right? It's to the kingdom of Christ. And so I think if you're making a pledge of allegiance to the kingdom of Christ, that makes a lot of sense to me. Even before having allegiance to America, I think that's a much healthier way of looking at it as Christians. That's very interesting, Matthew. I didn't know that. So Super T Rambler is kind of like being tongue-in-cheek when he's like, Fuki hates America confirmed. That's often how people interpret things, right? The things that you say, they interpret you in the worst way possible, right? But it's interesting. I think it would be kind of cool if government buildings had the Christian flag flying. You know, if we could put, hey, if we want to put Canada's flag in the foyer of the church, well, you should probably have the Christian flag, elsewhere. So continuing, it says, I just want to know an arrangement that can accurately convey the idea that the United States doesn't have a special claim on the Christian faith, rather more like the other way around. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Christianity has a claim on the United States as well as every other country, right? Because Christ is Lord of all. While at the same time not suggesting separation of church and state in the boogeyman sense of it. I had the same thing come up a month ago, and I expect it to again in another week. I honestly don't know how to unambiguously get the point across to everyone's understanding and satisfaction. And I haven't actually read this part here. I overheard some conversation this morning about faith and thanks toward God and love of country coming from one of the older gentlemen in the congregation. As an observation, I would say it's very difficult to convey to many church folks a view that recognizes the internationality of the church, where you're trying to get the flag and American civil religion out of the building and have them not think you're a liberal commie, right? It's right, because like I do not want America, like, you know, America to override, you know, the fact that Christianity is not an American religion, you know. That's what he's trying to get at. And yet, if you kind of like say, hey, you know what, let's tone down the America stuff, right? In the church, some people are kind of like, don't you love America? And like, and you know, are you a commie? It's like, well, I'm not. No, I'm definitely not a commie. All you guys who are my regulars know that I'm definitely not for communism or anything. But there's a sense in which it's like we fuse together, you know, American civil religion and Christianity, but in a way that puts Americanism before Christianity, sort of, you know. We just have to have a. But you are a socialist. Yes, socialist. Didn't you know that the Bible is like socialist because you should be generous and stuff? You should be generous and stuff. Therefore, socialist. Don't you get it, Matthew? Socialist means generosity with other people's money. All right. When listening and thinking about that, I suspect that the problems with Christian so this is another common thing that we're talking about today, recently, right? The last half year or so, last 6 months, is like Christian nationalism. And it's like some people like David French, you know, they're arguing, man, Christian nationalism is the big problem in our society, right? All these Christians throwing aside their Christianity in light of and instead saying Americanism is where it's at. It's like, well, like, nationalism can be a problem, but generosity. Nationalism is a problem because what it is the belief that, like, nationalism in a way can be a problem because it can be thought of as nation above all else, right? And you don't want that. But Christian nationalism, I don't understand the argument there, really, because if you're a Christian, you should want your nation to obey Christ and obey the law, you know, the law of Christ. So if you're Seal Centurion, welcome. So if you have a Christian nation, that in that sense you could say, oh, well, Christian nationalism is kind of what you want. A nation that is for Christ and submits to his law, his standards. So when listening and thinking about that, I suspect that the problems with Christian nationalism aren't always or even often what the urban evangelical elites think they are. I was pondering how I would go about explaining a proper Christian political theology that's right side up and has every nation submitted to the cosmic kingdom of Christ, and then pondering what they would look like in terms of its expression in a congregation. I think in the minds of a lot of these people, if asked that question, they would sincerely think that that's actually the prioritization that they're making. If push came to shove, I don't know that it would actually exactly pan out that way. But I'm still thinking about how to give them their patriotism and then also prioritize it under a greater patriotism to the kingdom of Christ, rather than falsely dichotomizing their patriotism, taking away their earthly love of country. So they, you know, brazen hisser here is just being honest about, like, I wonder, like, how can can we navigate those waters, right? Of yes, patriotism isn't really necessarily a bad thing, but like, so for example, right, being a patriot in America means something different than being a patriot in China, right? If you were a patriot in China, that means a lot of other things that you would not see as good. So to say that patriotism is a good thing is a little bit broad, right? So it's like patriotism in a country that is a good country, that is biblical and godly, is a good thing. But if it's a communist, if you're in a communist country and you're patriotic, then you know there's a problem there. Interesting thoughts. What's next on my list? Right, so changing gears now. You guys know how I do this first half of the stream. I always change gears. Andy, no. It's actually funny that he was reporting on this because, you know, he's an American journalist, right? But this is a very real thing that's a problem in Canada right now. Ever since the residential schools were found to be having unmarked graves in them. Dustbuster, Dan, just missed your last point. Welcome, Dustbuster. Missed your last point. Yeah, we were just talking about just the idea of flags and stuff, but patriotism. So we're actually having a big problem here in Canada, mostly in BC, British Columbia, where Catholic churches are being burned down because in response to these residential schools that, well, maybe I can read the article here. So let me see if I can read some of this for you guys. 2 more Catholic churches burned down in Indigenous communities in Western Canada early on Saturday. The fires at St. Anne's Church and the Chupaka Church began within an hour of each other in British Columbia. Officers said both buildings were completely destroyed, and some of these buildings were like almost 100 years old too, or over 100 years old. Like one of the churches was like built in 1907, which for Canada is like a really long time. Canada's only been a country for like 150 years, so they were destroyed, and they were treating the fires as, quote, suspicious. Well, hang on, time out. Decolonization attacks equal postmodern neocolonialism. That's really interesting that yeah. Because, like, that's just it, right? It's kind of like the CRT thing, where you think that you're undoing racism, but what you're doing is you're enacting more racism. It's kind of a similar thing here, where it's like, you think you're decolonizing, but you're actually colonizing again, but just in the reverse way. Last Monday, 2 other Catholic churches in the province were destroyed in fires as Canada marked National Indigenous Peoples Day. So basically, it's like the Juneteenth in Canada, when it happens like a week prior. The investigations into the previous fires and those 2 new fires are ongoing with no arrests or charges, Royal Canadian Mounted Police Sergeant Jason Beta said. It comes after hundreds. So this is where it kind of began the story. It comes after hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered at sites of former residential schools in Canada. Columbus Day, you mean? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, colonization. That's all he did. The reason why we celebrate Columbus was not because he discovered, North America, and it's because he was a racist. That's why we celebrate him, right? The only reason we have any statues of anybody anywhere is because we're celebrating all of the worst parts of that person. Didn't you know that, Seal? The government-funded compulsory schools were run. Now notice this, right? So the Catholic churches are being burned down because in the residential schools, some of these schools, they were found these unmarked graves, and so people are lashing out on the Catholic Church, right, and Christians in general. But notice, the government-funded compulsory schools were run by religious groups in the 19th and 20th centuries with the aim of assimilating indigenous youth. So this goes right into the whole narrative about, like Yoshi said, colonization. He mentioned colonization. The narrative about colonization, how dare, you know, Europeans bring their culture to here, and guess what? The U.S. did that too. Yeah. And here's the thing: is like, the brunt of the insults and stuff is happening to the Catholic Church, but it was funded by the government. So whoever was in charge needs to face some kind of penalty or whatever, right? We need to get to the bottom of this, right? But this stuff is being used as a weapon to say, you know what, let's celebrate Canada Day, and let's, you know, it's very dangerous. As I mentioned last time we were together doing our study stream, very dangerous to have two separate Independence Days, right? It's very dangerous to have a Canada Day and an Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah, it's very dangerous to have a Juneteenth and also a 4th of July. Like, these are... On the surface, you might go, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with celebrating, you know, freedom from slavery. There's nothing wrong with celebrating a certain group of people on a certain day, right? But the problem is that it's morphing into, oh, you have Canada Day. You people have Canada Day. We have Indigenous Peoples Day. You people have 4th of July. We have Juneteenth. And that's causing... This is one more, like, you know, strike against a unified nation, right? We're doing all of these, taking all these steps to divide each other on many different grounds. So... events happened 100, 200 years ago, therefore the spiritual successors of these events must be punished and preparations be made. Who cares if none of us were alive? Oh, Seal, you and your kappas. That's just it though, right? It's like, we actually read in scripture, let me, I need to memorize where this is. Yeah, Deuteronomy 24:16. Fathers shall not be put to death sorry, parents, or hang on, let me find it. Fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin alone. And then elsewhere in the prophets, that's Deuteronomy 24:16, and then you have, let me try to find this passage. Jeremiah, that's it. Jeremiah 31:30. Everyone will die. 31:30. Everyone will die for his own wrongdoing. Each person who eats the sour grapes, his own teeth will become blunt. So we know from scripture, if we are trying to be biblical, which we should be as Christians, really everybody should be trying to be biblical, right? We know that you cannot punish sons for the crimes of their father. That's not just. But the justice that we see in society is not based on God's law or the law of Christ. It's based on our own subjective feelings about the matter. So anyway, that's being monitored. The story being monitored right now in regards to the fires. Catholic churches are being burned down right now because of an act of vengeance on people's parts. And the thing is, I've even seen some indigenous people who were upset about this because some of them are Catholic, right? And they go, you just burned down my church, you know? So it's no small matter. Here's a couple from Michael Foster. If we merely lead by example, we leave those under our care to make their own conclusions on why we do what we do. Vengeance? 4. So, basically what happened was... let me go back to the story here. And I'll talk about it. The government-funded schools, compulsory schools, were run by religious groups in the 19th and 20th centuries with the aim of assimilating indigenous youth. Indigenous groups have demanded a nationwide search for more graves. Forgive me for not pronouncing these names, they're kind of difficult. Lower Similkameen Indian band chief Keith Crow told public broadcaster CBC he had received a call early in the morning saying that the Chapaka church was on fire. It had burned to the ground by the time he arrived half an hour later. I'm angry, the chief told CBC. I don't see any positive coming from this, and it's going to be tough. Many in the Catholic Church in the community are Catholic Church members and are upset about the blaze, he said. Okay, and so here's where to answer your question, Seal. In May, the Lumps Te Sequapemec First Nation announced the discovery of the remains of 215 children at a school in British Columbia. So, like, they were in, like, unmarked graves, basically. They found them at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, which was opened under Roman Catholic administration in 1890 and closed in 1978. So here's another kind of like a little wrench for the in this, right? Is that these schools were open like 10 years before I was born, right? So like it's very likely that there are people who are still alive today that may have suffered injustices at the hands of this school. So if that's the case, then it should be investigated, right? And figured out, well, who did this? Why did they, like, how did they get away with it? Why did the government continue to fund these schools and not invest, not like make sure that stuff was going on there that was just and right? Of course, I can talk about the fact that why was the government funding the school in the first place, and but it caused a lot of. It's basically it's a very complicated thing now to unravel. We got ourselves into this huge mess, and now we have to unravel it. Because now it's like, well, the government should have been investigating that school and making sure that they were doing what they should have been doing. But really, before that point, they should have not have been funding the school in the first place, right? So this is why the vengeance is so intense for a lot of people. But then again, at the same time, it might not even be a matter of vengeance because we don't know who did it. We don't know who is burning these churches down. So it could just be a matter of like the revolutionaries, the revolutionary types, wanting to destroy Western imperialism and this kind of stuff, right? We don't know. This is why it's so hard to talk about this story, because even though my nation, the nation of Canada, is up in arms about all of this, like, what should we do? Is the question, and I don't see a lot of actual like things being said or done in regards to actually solving the problem, like actually like giving restitution to people, which is different, right, than reparations. So again, here on Thursday, the Cowessess First Nation said it had found 751 unmarked graves at a former residential school in Saskatchewan. The Medieval Indian Residential School was also operated by the Roman Catholic Church, funded by the government. Deaths in Canada's compulsory boarding schools were due in large part to the squalid health conditions inside. Students were often housed in poorly built, poorly heated, and unsanitary facilities. Between 1863 and 1998, so that was 20 years ago, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were taken from their families and placed in these schools throughout Canada. I never heard about any of this until this past week. A commission launched in 1908 to document the impact of the system found that large numbers of indigenous children had never returned to their home communities. The Commission's landmark report said the practice had amounted to cultural genocide. And then it just says at the bottom here, the Canadian government has formally apologized for the system. Okay, well, again, you can say you're sorry, like, all day, but, like, if there's actually something that you did wrong, then there has to be restitution for that, right? And again, it's complicated now because the government shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Yeah, well, Canada is so large and many communities so isolated, it's difficult for anyone to hear about this. Yeah, it can be, Seal. But it's just, I hate how convenient this story is, you know? It was like, it's kind of similar to the talk America was having about Juneteenth, right? It's like, this story came out, apparently almost no one knew about this, and then it became national news like 5 days before National Aboriginal Day, which is like a week before Canada Day. So it's just frustrating to me how it's like, what? So no one knew about this until this point, and now everyone seems to care about it. And it's like, I don't know, it feels so disingenuous, you know? How it's like, oh, well, look at that, we broke the story, and it just so happened that it landed so close to Aboriginal Day and Canada Day, and it's like, no one in the government knew about this? No one knew this was happening in the government, even though they funded it. But either way, we should get to the bottom of who was in charge during the 1900s or the 2000s, not 2000s, 1900s, and figure out where the funding went and who greenlit the funding and make restitution. That's fine, right? But you don't get justice by committing more injustice. You don't solve the problem of injustice by committing more injustice. So you don't start burning churches down because you think that you'll right some wrong, you know, or because you're a revolutionary who will change the system by burning all churches down. Okay, great point from Seal here. This is actually a good point that we were just reading about. The fact that a commission was created in 2008 and it was just brought to light now means that this was totally dug up out of political expediency and virtue signaling. And it's like, exactly, I that's the way I feel about it, and it makes sense. Let me go back to that, actually. So, a commission launched in 2008 to document the impact of the system found that large numbers of indigenous children had never returned to their home communities. The Commission's landmark report said that the practice had amounted to cultural genocide. Right, exactly. Okay, yeah. So Seal picked up on something that I didn't pick up on. So exactly. So what the heck? Like, why now? Like, if you actually want justice for these things, then why do you sit on it until it's politically expedient to talk about it? Like, I don't. Like, unlike a lot of these other people, I don't want to play games with this stuff. I want these wrongs to be righted, you know? And they just sat on this stuff until, man. Yeah, great point there, Seal. So, love of self over love of people and country. Yeah. Love of, yeah. And so now, because it's like we're turning on each other, while at the same time, like, all of these people are keeping this stuff from us. Like now we want to say, like, Canada's government apologizes and says, "Oh, we're sorry about that, sorry." It's like, yeah, for the last 12 years or 13 years, you knew about this stuff from the commission and you didn't do anything about it. So you're saying you're sorry, but you're only saying you're sorry now, that it cannot no longer be avoided, you know? Every major government has gotten corrupted this way, and it's sad. It has become a club of the elite. Yeah, that's true. And the way we change that, you know, elitist government culture is by, ultimately, we all know this, it's by the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? We change things the way Christ tells us to change them, right? Weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They are the tearing down of strongholds, right? We present the gospel, present the truth of Christ. We tell the nations of the world, kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, right? As the Psalms say. Disciple the nations, telling them to obey all that I, Christ, have commanded you. We can talk about like macro stuff, right? We talk about national change, right? But it won't change if we just change the president or change the prime minister, right? You need to actually change the hearts and minds of people. And sadly, this is something that leftists understood. They understood the long game. They understood that what you need to do is you need to, yes, fight what you can on like the national front, but at the same time, we need to be fighting on the ground level, right? In educating children and changing culture and being involved in the arts, and being involved in making, you know, TV shows and movies and stuff like that, right? And over time, those kids who were taught in public schools and who were, you know, who enjoyed certain kinds of fiction and art and all this, those kids became adults, and those adults now run everything, right? So that's what we have to do as Christians is, yes, think about national, and telling the nations to repent and tell them to obey Christ. Otherwise, your land will be destroyed. But the real work is the gospel changing the individual's heart, because a nation is comprised of communities, and communities are comprised of families, and families are comprised of individuals. So if we want to change our nation, we have to become even more on fire for the Lord, rather than on fire for some sort of, you know, patriotism, or some sort of, I should say, misguided patriotism, or some form of, you know, nationalism divorced from Christianity, right? I think nationalism is a good thing if it's Christian nationalism, right? Patriotism is a good thing if it's Christian patriotism. Christ above all, and then after that. Yeah, so anyway, Foster here says, I think this is really great. If we merely lead by example, you know, do as I say, or do as I do, not what I say, we leave those under our care to make their own conclusions as to why we did what we do. If we merely lead by instruction, we undo the power of our teaching with the reality of our practice. That's so good. So like, we have to be consistent both in doing and in speaking, right? I've heard the phrase, there's this common like Christian phrase where it says, you know, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. I'm not a fan of that phrase. I think it's very, I think it's misleading. I think it's incorrect. You lead by example, but you also lead by outright instruction and telling them, well, this is what Christ says, and this is the true beliefs about the world. So you gotta do both. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, we're running a little short on time, so I might want to skip a couple of these. Just a quick one from Joseph Boot. This one's great. He says, just in case you thought all lockdowns and restrictions were about health in Canada, watch this short briefing clip explaining that banning large groups is also about stopping the spread of false information. So this is wild stuff. I couldn't believe this was actually the case when I was actually listening to this. So let's see.
But I think.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my questions. I'm wondering about the injunction banning public gatherings and whether there really is a need for such a far-reaching one given the trajectory we're on now.
So, I mean, I think it's still there. We still have bringing large numbers of people together. It can present some risk. We'll continue to look at that. But I think the other purpose of the injunction is to prevent groups that are spreading deliberately spreading false information that can actually create risk. The information itself, if listened to, creates risk to the public as well. So, and that certainly is a need to manage that misinformation campaign as well.
So he just admitted there that, well, listening to misinformation itself causes risk, right? And the past 16 months has been like, well, we might make sure we minimize risk, and we want to love our neighbors and minimize risk. So he twists it to be like, well, risk is also having people gather together and like tell each other things that is incorrect and is false information. It's like, what, dude? You hear yourself when you speak. How do you do? I know, yeah, it is table flip worthy. How do you do this? Like, so like I couldn't. I was like, okay, well, I'll listen because I trust Joe Boot, right? I trust this man immensely. It's like, okay, well, this is interesting. I'll take a look at this video, and it's like I couldn't believe it, like unauthorized information. So he just admitted when he was questioned, like, yeah, COVID's getting better and all that stuff, but also gotta be mindful about unauthorized information. Can you imagine a more Orwellian phrase? Unauthorized information. Whoa. Oh man, that's Canada. Burn the books, yeah. I forget who said it now. Let me try and find it now. I heard this phrase. It's related to burning books. Burn. What is it? Yes. Henrik Hein said. Yeah. Said, where they have burned books, they will end up burning human beings or burning men. Or another translations say, wherever books are burned, men in the end will also burn. And it's like, yeah, because outside of books, right? What is the vector for unauthorized information? It's humans, because humans speak to other humans. They confer information to each other. So if you're willing to, we're poking fun at it because it is so absurd, right? But if you're willing to burn books and burn information, destroy information, humans are the primary vector of information transmission, if you want to put it that way. If you want to use the terminology that's related to COVID, like this guy did. And again, it's one of those bizarre things where it's like, it's not like some dude, some tinfoil hat guy, saying this stuff. Like, he's there to answer questions related from the public, and he's a government official of Nova Scotia, and it's like, oh yeah, false information is also a risk factor, like COVID was. Like, it's no coincidence that the terminology is the same, Anyway, that was a crazy thing there. We'll see what happens with that. It's a quick little thing here. Actually, not a quick thing at all, but the B reports Canada moves to hit citizens with $20,000 fine for online hate speech. I'll actually read a little part of this. So it says here, Trudeau has released a statement on Wednesday with the proposed legislation, i.e. Bill C-36. So here he is on his soapbox. Online hate can turn into offline hate with devastating impacts on communities and families. You see, words are violence, right? So if you say certain things online, that means that then, start to just, kill people offline. We have a responsibility to victims to take action to combat hate online and continue to build a more inclusive Canada, right? Because government is mommy and daddy, like they're your parents. The wording is sneaky because it sounds like Trudeau is only trying to stop people from doing physically violent things to other people. The word "can" in the phrase "can" turn into offline hate is the Trojan horse of this legislation. All Canadian government needs is the possibility that someone saying mean stuff online could, perhaps, result in something violent in real life. That is all they need to say the bill is designed to do good in protecting people from harm in real life. As C.S. Lewis once said, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. The scariest part of the bill is the ambiguity of phrases that will carry immense weight in court. No, it says here, the bill, this is a quotation, the bill aims to, quote, amend the Canadian Human Rights Act to define a new discriminatory practice of communicating hate speech online and to provide individuals with the additional remedies to address hate speech. Add definition of hatred to section 319 of the Criminal Code based on Supreme Court of Canada decisions, and create a new peace bond in the Criminal Code designed to prevent hate propaganda offenses and hate crimes from being committed, and make related amendments to the Youth Criminal Justice Act, as Trudeau says. Ultimately, the Canadian government has positioned itself to define sin, hatred, and provide salvation, remedies. Boy, that sure does sound like a theocracy, except the god of this government is the government itself. Because it's very vague, right? It's anything that they deem as potentially causing harm in real life, right? So if I say something like, oh, I don't know, homosexuality is a sin, it could be seen as a criminal offense in Canada, because you're saying, well, what you just said could be used as a vector to commit real life violent acts, even though what you meant was not that at all. You did not intend or incite violence in real life, but you're speaking a truth about a certain kind of behavior. This is the kind of stuff that's going on in Canada. It's extremely dangerous, and there's very little in way of like stopping this legislation from passing. It still needs to pass. It hasn't passed just yet, but the cards are saying that it probably will. I mean, here's another point here. How on earth did they come up with the number 20,000 for saying something mean online? And this is a very important point in terms of restitution. And to whom is the fine being paid? The government? According to liberal logic, someone harmed by online hate speech is a victim. So, if that person is the victim of this hate crime, why is the government being paid for the damages? See, this is not justice. Justice in Scripture states that, like, you have to have a specific person who was wronged and a specific person who does the wronging, who does the wrong. But here, this kind of like hate crime stuff is just like, oh yeah, you said things that we deem as mean, so give us money. Like, it's monstrous, just monstrous. Okay, I'll have to skip this one. I wanted to look at this one about the myth of the Republican-Democrat switch, mainly because, well, first of all, I really like Jonathan Sarfany's work and I trust him, but also I've heard this argument recently. Like, probably, like, in the last month, and I have never heard of it. What the?
Justice for justice.
Justice for justice. What the? Adam in Exile with the 13 months. What a monster. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. God bless. I think you might be the longest subscribed person I have. Cheers for that. But yes, since we're running out a little short on time, I will forgo this story, but I do want to read this because this argument was put to me and I hadn't thought about it or heard about it until then. So I'll review that maybe later, but I want to get to the main crux of the title of my stream today. Kink shaming. This is why I call it kink shaming, because I want to review this Washington Post article, as well as Hans Fiene. Hans here, he's the guy who did the Lutheran satire stuff. You guys ever seen that? Which a lot of people have. It went viral. So that's modalism, Patrick. So yeah, it's he did that. So he has a nice thread about this article that I also want to read. So let's go ahead and do that. So I want to hear. Let's listen to his insights. Do I want to read this first, or I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but I'll read the first few little paragraphs. Our family often took the train into Philadelphia, and as we rode across the bridge to attend the city's Pride Parade 5 years ago, my wife's leg bounced with a nervous jitter. My wife's. Already, we know where this is going, because the person who wrote this was a woman. So supposedly Lauren, and the picture is feminine. She squeezed my hand, worried about she might run into a colleague or be harassed by a stranger. My wife is trans. Okay, and it wasn't at the time, so she typically only expressed her authenticity in the privacy of our home. That morning, she wore a green skirt and light makeup, brushing her hair all to one side. Even though we attended pride marches and protests in previous years, that day was our first celebrating openly as a family. When our children grew tired of marching, we plopped into a nearby curb. Just as we got settled, our elementary schooler pointed in the direction of oncoming floats, raising an eyebrow at a bare-chested man in dark sunglasses whose black suspenders clipped into a leather thong. The man paused to be spanked playfully by a partner with a flog. What are they doing? My curious kid asked as our toddler cheered them on. The pair was the first of a few dozen kinksters who danced down the street, laughing together as they twirled their whips and batons, some leading companies by leashes. This is not like a Pink News or something, or Huffington Post. This is the Washington Post. This is like one of the most popular newspapers in the country. At the time, my children were too young to understand the nuance of the situation. The nuance. There's no nuance here. But I told them the truth, that these folks were members of our community, celebrating who they are and what they like to do. Yes, what they like to do in public. There's plenty of things that we do that we don't air out in public. The Kink community has participated in Pride since its inception, risking their jobs and safety to be authentically themselves in public. Yes, this is actually a very important point, that the Kink community is connected to Pride marches and stuff. There's no way to separate them, because the whole point of the Pride Parade is to say, I like to have sex with certain things. Like, that's the point of it. So, of course, the kink is going to be connected to that. If kink equals sexual in nature, why isn't it indecent exposure? What you like to do in your bedroom is not your identity. Right, exactly. But the way that this person is going to argue is, she argues that, like, it's like being yourself, right? It's equivalent of being free and being your authentic self, right? And who you really are. But the problem is that they equate your sexual proclivities and the things that you like to do with your genitalia with a something that should be celebrated. And it's like, well, some things should not be celebrated. And furthermore, as you said, indecent exposure, certain things aren't, even if you're heterosexual, you shouldn't be doing that in public, right? But for some reason, she's managed to twist herself in knots to the point where she thinks that BDSM is something that her kids should see, and know about. And this is basically just a form of grooming. Let me continue to finish this paragraph here. Those hoping to oust kinksters often cite the presence of children as their top concern, even though, like I said, Pride and the Pride Parade and kink are like linked together because that's the whole point of it. It's to celebrate who you are sexually, because like originally homosexuality was the main centerpiece of the Pride Parade, but homosexuality is primarily about sex. If that were true, I should be able to ask you right here on stream to tell us all your sexual fantasies. And if you were hesitant, that would only mean you've been yeah, you got it. Yeah, I mean, that would only mean you're repressed by toxic culture and need to be saved. Yeah, you need to be woke. You need to be awakened to how much the colonizers have colonized your mind, or my mind. It doesn't hold up under any kind of scrutiny, of course. That was pointedly the case this year when Twitter's users argued that kink at Pride is a highly sexualized experience that children should be shielded from. Thousands of users supported these posts, claiming that kink at Pride crosses a line because minors also attend events. Okay, let me tell you this story. I think it was two years ago. 2 years ago, I attended a Pride event that was a new thing for the town that I lived in, like until like a month ago. So like my town is the town was fairly small, about 30,000 people. So like town and city levels, and this event was going on, right? I was like, you know what? I'm gonna check out and see what it's like, right? At one point in this event, there was a drag like a drag show, but it was also like a dancing competition type thing. So we had right in the middle of the city, right on the street. There were actually, I think I tweeted about it. Let me see if I can find the picture. But there were like guys dressed up like caricatures of women dancing suggestively, and I was like, is anyone else bothered by this? I feel like I got the feeling like that we just couldn't say anything about it, right? Let me do the advanced search here on Twitter. See if I can find that post from ages ago. It was like 2 years ago. So, try to find that. Nope. I think I want to find the picture here. So I took pictures while like just to get to the point of it. Yep, there it is. I found it. So I did like a whole like thread here. I think I reviewed this a while ago, but I'll go over it again quickly. This was 2019. Today was my first time attending a Pride event. I live in a relatively small town, so in a way, this kind of stuff seems so distant, theoretical. Pride events are things that happen over there, not in towns like mine. I want to talk about what I saw today. Intimacy is so private to me, I have a hard time even dancing with another woman, even in well, that's alright. Even an instructional dance course became a big problem in my first long-term relationship. Oh, really? Yeah, it's not necessarily a problem, but it can be. So, saw people of all ages wearing shirts that said, "Love is love." The festival itself was called Pride and Diversity. Babies and toddlers holding lesbian or bisexual flags. One, in particular, was wearing a button that said, "Love has no limits." So many words, so few definitions. Yeah, so the button was worn by like a 4-year-old, I think it was, and it's like, love has no limits. I'm like, do you even think about what you're saying? The police at the event weren't shy about showing their allegiance. So the police here, you can see at the time was the police of the town wearing little bracelets that had rainbow on them. Also from this angle you can't see, but he's also wearing like a pin on his shirt. The stars of the festival, the acts that got the biggest crowds, were a drag show troupe called Troy Boy Entertainment. In between their sets, people were lining up to get pictures with them and telling them how great they were and how brave they were. It's right up there with babies and toddlers holding signs saying "My body, my choice." Right? It's so weird because if you take that logic, Seal, like again, I get that we say like, oh, it's icky. Like we don't like we still our society still doesn't like pedophilia, and rightly so. Like it's a good thing that we don't, right? But the logic that is used, like "My body, my choice," and the logic that is used in transgender surgery, right? And hormone blockers and stuff like that. It's the same logic. It's like, well, if it really is your choice, and it really is just a matter of like, oh, well, discovering your authentic self and all that, then why don't kids have if kids have the right to decide for themselves, what gender they are and what sex they are, then that's like a life-altering decision. Like you decide that, you start taking hormone replacements stuff. Like that changes your entire life. If you start having surgery, your life is forever marred. What exactly is the difference between the argument between that and having a relationship with an adult for a child? Like, there's no difference beyond us being like, oh, that's gross. We don't like that. Now, from the Christian perspective, that is immoral, right? But a lot of things are immoral that our culture has just been like, whatever. So this is why the concern comes up where it's like, how much longer are we going to have to... Is it going to be considered that icky of a thing, right? This is the thing, is you can't have a moral system that's just about whether you find something icky or not. It has to be an actual, like, objective moral standard. But yeah. So let me continue this. So the entertainers at Troy Boy Entertainment. So here's some pictures I took. Here's the MC. This is the MC right here. On the left, holding the Chinese fan. From Troy Boy, gathering all the people with birthdays together, kids included, to sing them happy birthday. See? Totally non-threatening, no big deal, right? Here's a performer whose actual stage name was Violet Seduction. Yeah, why yes, he is wearing a BDSM-style belt. Why do you ask? His actual stage name was Violet Seduction. Note, the MC always referred to the performers as she and her, even though they were all men. Don't worry, we were assured by the MC that this show may seem a bit tame, but the 9 o'clock p.m. show would be more, to quote him, naughty. I'm sorry, I was told these pride events have nothing to do with sex, and are actually an expression of who you really are. So why does it keep coming up? So, like, he actually did this. He actually, like, near the end, he was, like, assuring the audience, like, guys, I know, don't worry, 9 o'clock, it's gonna get naughty. Okay, alright, like, Here's Mrs. Victoria Parks, whose performance consisted of standing in place, lip-syncing with a female vocal cover of John Lennon's Imagine, a song with truly abominable lyrics now that I have made an effort to listen to them. And here's the creme de la creme of my picture taken here. MC speaks about how pleased he is with the turnout and with how drag families are beginning to pop up. And now, here's Sapphire Poison, who really got this crowd going when he started unzipping his jumpsuit. The reason they might get away with it is that they point to how the meds aren't life-altering or can be reversed. Don't think it falls under scrutiny, though. Yeah, I don't think it holds under scrutiny. Yeah. The show went on like this until the end. MC reiterated that not all their shows are for all ages, and that if you want to see more, you would have to come to other shows. MC said they'll be doing burlesque and, quote, boylesque. No, I don't know what that means. Shows in July. MC ended MC ended the set by explaining that this show was a celebration for you to be whoever you are, boy, girl, and everything in between, end quote. His last words were the festival slogan, celebrate your awesome. Because I really, yeah, because even that wording is terrible, right? Celebrate your awesome. So it's like, it's not like celebrate, comma, you're awesome. It's just like, you have an awesome of your own, and so you should celebrate that awesome. So, that was my day. Not one Christian out there taking a stand, preaching the gospel. I did run into a Christian I know who works for the town. She was taking pictures for the event. I asked her why she was doing it. She said she had no choice in the matter. To top it all off, on the way back from the festival, and by God's providence, sifting through the hundreds of podcasts that I still need to listen to, I came upon a sermon by T.J. Sumter called The Necessity of Courage. Conviction weighs heavy upon me. I should have just started speaking out loud on that street corner there and then. Damn the consequences. I must speak to my pastor about the church having a presence there next year. And this is just before COVID happened, right? This is like the next year COVID happened. I hope you do the same, because we can't have people running roughshod over his kingdom. But yeah, I was there and I was like, this is wild. Like, how are we just like okay with it? Everyone's just standing here. Everyone's okay with this. And so I was just like, I really I was like so close to just being like, I wasn't prepared for it. I just came down there to just see what it was like, because I heard stuff about it, right? And I was just like, I was this close to being like, I'm just gonna start shouting out loud and just being like, not shouting anyone down in particular, but just being like, you know, basically just giving the gospel and doing street preaching. And I was this close, but I was like, it's not a thing I usually do. And so I just felt so like, what I was seeing was madness. Like, this was the picture that did my head in. Was the one out of all of them. Was like, this guy is doing like a strip tease, just in the middle of the street with the kids around, and everyone's watching it. Like, yeah, great. I love men doing that. Like, so that's an old one. Fish out of water. It was. I was like, I wanted to just like be like, is anyone else seeing what I'm seeing? Am I taking crazy pills over here? You know, like, I wanted to just like start preaching the gospel, but I've heard that it's important to have like some backup when you do stuff like that, like to actually have someone in your corner so that you can protect yourself and stuff. So I just, yeah, talked to my pastor about it, and then, you know, we were like, yeah, we should probably do something about that, like during the event next year. But then COVID happened, right? And so the event got canceled. So, so with that, there's more to the article, but basically she was just saying that kink is good. My kids should be exposed to it, because kink is not inherently a sexual thing, even though it absolutely is. Because it's all about your fetish. So, but let me finish this section of a stream by reading what Hans says here, and then we'll explore that. For self-identified conservatives who support gay marriage, please consider the speed with which we've gone from Obergefell 2015 to the Washington Post running pro-exposing kids to kink op-eds. Perhaps now is the time to adopt a more consistent worldview. Everything revolves around sex, but isn't sexual. Press X. Entire thing revolves around sex, but isn't sexual. Press X to doubt. Yep. I don't. They're intentionally trying to muddy the waters, right? And be like, oh no, it's not something to do with sex. All that it is really is I celebrate who I am, and who I am, a key part of who I am is the things I like to have sex with. And like to oh boy, anyway, I can be a lot more crass than that, but Hans says, I have said this before and I will say it again. What makes a worldview successful is not its reasonableness, but its consistency. In the long run, people will follow leaders who follow their ideas to their logical conclusion. They won't follow leaders who don't. Here's what this means with regard to the culture wars. You can't have a world that celebrates monogamous modern family homosexuality, but not naked men gyrating in front of children during a gay pride parade. In the same way, you can't have a world that says, let men have their healthy penises cut off if they think they're women, but then draws the line at doing the same thing for children. Either transgender identities are a real identity, or they are not, regardless of your age. That's how worldviews work. You may want to stay in moderate land. You may be much more comfortable in a live and let live world that still tries to protect the innocence of children. That's not how the world works. Lawrence v. Kansas was supposed to usher in the live and let live world you want, and you want it to last. It didn't even last for 20 years. So that's reality. Either we as a society discourage sodomy, or we celebrate it. Hello, Delcary. Welcome. Welcome. So many friendly faces tonight. Either men go to jail for cross-dressing in public, or they go to jail for refusing to philosophically assent to the concept of transgenderism. Been a while, brother. Yeah, it has been. I haven't been able to stream as often as I would like, but I'm hoping to get into it again. What topic to step into? Yes, we were reviewing this post from the Washington Post. This op-ed that says, yes, kink belongs at Pride, and I want my kids to see it. And I found a very useful insight from Hans Fine, who did a very nice little Twitter thread about responding to it. But yes, you've stepped into a rather fiery one here. Welcome to the party. And where was I? Yes. So in reality, we have to accept one reality or the other, right? One worldview or the other. Those are your choices. And if you want to build a world where your kids aren't going to be groomed and sexually exploited, you will only get the world one way, by opposing all forms of unnatural unions. You may have gay friends that you love very much, and those friends may be firmly opposed to exposing children to kink or grooming them. I'm glad that they do. But that doesn't change the fact that criminalizing sodomy and legalizing gay marriage decriminalizing sodomy and legalizing gay marriage put our nation on the path to exposing children to kink or grooming them. And you won't get on the path back home without opposing gay marriage. That's just the way things work. So Hans was saying that, was kind of talking to a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans who are like, well, let's just not worry about too much, right? It's just such a sticky issue. Let's just put it aside. We don't have to talk about that. It's like, well, no, it's related directly to what's happening in our culture right now. It's like, you have a problem with cuties. You have a problem with child grooming and kink, kids becoming kinksters, because children, of course, who are exposed to kink are going to see that as okay, so they're going to start to do kink, right? Because it's kink is fine, right? Think about that, right? Kids, when they see something, they want to imitate those things. Believe me, I've hung out with kids long enough to know that when they see something, they imitate them. I've played enough superhero make-believe with my young nieces and nephews to know that they will actually mimic and imitate the things they see, and they get their imagination from those things. So if you think that you can expose a child to kink and then not have them imitate kink, you're not even thinking straight. Right? Which is why the term grooming comes up, because kink has a primarily... I haven't agree disagree on the take on the last tweet. Go for it. So those things cannot be helped, right? You're gonna have that that's the way it's going to be. So, of course, you're not thinking straight. Well, that's true. So the idea from this op-ed piece was that, well, you shouldn't kink shame. It's like, well, showing kink to kids makes them want to imitate kink, which is a form of sexual grooming, because kink has a massive sexual overtones. So I agree that you don't get on the path back without opposing gay marriage, but only because the woke will not let you. But only because the woke will not let you oppose kink without labeling you as homophobic. So do you disagree with that? Do you agree that gay marriage should be a thing, or that? Because I would argue that one of the things that started our decline as a culture was the accepting of gay marriage, right? Because from there you get overtones, undertones, flats, sharps, majors, minors, etc. Harmonizings. Because I think you can be someone who is respectful of gay marriage but oppose public displays of sexuality. Interesting. Because I would say that gay marriage is what started us on the path. It was the major stepping stone that started us on the path to greater sexual dysfunction, right? Because the way that God set up marriage to work is that marriage is a union between a man and a woman, right? Both sides want to say that's not true. Well, both sides do. Both sides want to say you're for us or against us. Right. I agree it was a catalyst. Okay. So, yeah, so we can say then that, you know, by departing from the biblical understanding of marriage, which it's sort of like the frog in the pot, you know, it's just a scenario, right? Started with, oh, you know what? We don't even want gay marriage. We just want, you know, civil unions was the term that was used, right? And then it became, okay, actually no gay marriage though. And then marriage became this nebulous thing that doesn't really mean anything, because and then that's how we got to, you know what? Husbands and wife don't mean anything, and son and daughter don't mean anything, because you're now putting, you know, labels on people, and you're putting restrictions on the way marriages should function. But the people who start one thing are not always the people who carry it into what it becomes. Oh, that's true. But that's true. I agree with that. Like, the people themselves are not always the same people. But acceptance of gay marriage eroded well-established boundaries, but new boundaries were not put in place in a timely manner. See, and the thing is, those new boundaries were never going to be, even if they were put up in a timely manner, let's say, those boundaries have no foundation, right? So the foundation of, you know, to monogamous, like, heterosexual marriage, the boundary there is the Bible, right? So you can throw that aside, and then you can put in some new boundaries. Even if you did put them new boundaries in a timely manner, those boundaries would be artificial, because they're not based on the law of God, right? They're based on some conception of our own devising, right? So you're totally right that the foundations disappeared. Full agree. Okay, yeah. Right now we've deconstructed marriage into two people who love each other and now want to legally do some stuff together, but then soon more than two, right? So like, even in the case of, like, let's say bisexual, for example, right? To be a truly fulfilled, like, bisexual, but also be married, you would also have to have three people involved, right? Unless that other person was both genders. Because in order to be a truly fulfilled bisexual in a marriage, you have to have sexual relations with a man and a woman. But bisexuality implies that there's only two sexes. But there isn't. There's actually a multitudinous amount, an infinite amount of sexes. So you couldn't have bisexual marriage unless you had a marriage that was for an infinite number of people. You see what I'm saying? You see where this is going, right? So the breakdown kind of began with throwing, as you just admitted, Adamant, throwing away the biblical foundation for marriage. You throw away what marriage means, what man means, what woman means, what husband, wife, son, daughter, father, mother. You throw all that away because you have to try and now fit this man-made paradigm into this system that's not designed for it, right? Seal says, the funny thing is, even the pride community can't agree with itself. Have you heard of the whole pansexuals are biphobic thing? Yes, I have. And I guess it's related to what I was just saying, right? Because it's like, bi implies two. Bi means two. But pan means pan means all. Means everything or all. So it's like, if you're a bisexual, that means you only have two things that you like to have sex with. Male and female. But there's pan means dinner. It can mean that too. Especially if you're pan frying something. But so it is a system that is designed to self-destruct. I shouldn't say designed. It's the system that inevitably will self-destruct. I thought pan meant Greek nature god who is half goat. Huh? Need a big old kappa on that one. The pan. You ever heard of the pan flute? Yeah, goat. You know, satyrs and all that. That's gotta be what that means, right? So I know it's hard for us as 21st century people, in the current year to kind of wrestle with this idea. But it really is the case that throwing away the actual foundations of gay marriage, of marriage and putting gay marriage in place, destabilized all the other definitions, right? Because that's going to happen when you have marriage. Like, what is marriage? Well, if two men can get married and two women can get married, and so that means that what's stopping other people from getting married, who are also part of the spectrum of sexuality? I believe in the freedom to fail. Yeah, well, in a vacuum, yeah. But it only works if the old systems remain as the available option. Where things are going haywire is that there's an effort to erode the old foundations so they aren't around for people to challenge their own ideas. An effort to erode the old foundations. Yes, definitely is an effort to erode the old foundations. That, you know, G.K. Chesterton once said, right? Like, never move a boundary marker without questioning why the marker was put there in the first place. The fences. The fence phrasing. You move fences, but you have to ask, well, why is there the fence there? So they aren't around people to challenge their own ideas. And yes, there is a concerted effort to, as I think it was Seal mentioned, kind of tongue-in-cheekly, like, burn all the books, right? You burn the books, you destroy ideas, you destroy information, and doing so, you think you're helping people, but you're actually destroying the means by which you can reach a positive conclusion, right? So, like, so, and ultimately, of course, Christianity is the good system. It is the good old system that we are quickly abandoning. We are abandoning the worship of God for the worship of self. And self-worship, what we're seeing in our society is what self-worship looks like. Right? CRT, intersectionality, the idea of you know, sort of, what's the term? Like, cred. Like, you have, like, personal credit when you're a victim, right? Victim mentality and that kind of stuff. All that stems from pride and from self-worship, right? And forget all the systems that came before me. The system that I want to happen is the system that is good, right? So anyway, there have been a number of people. I think Matt Walsh also did one from on the Daily Wire. He did a show. I read about this post as well. He had his own ideas. I can't remember what they were now, but they were also very interesting. But you know, it always bothers me when, you know, Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, they're Catholics, right? And it bothers me when it's like, you know, you guys know that they see there's a problem with this. They do see that there's a problem with this, but they don't point to Christ, you know, specifically as the answer to the problem. It's kind of like, oh, well, this is a bad thing, and we shouldn't want this for our kids. But it comes across sometimes more of like, well, I don't like this thing. And that can never be our argument for like why this thing shouldn't be done, because I don't happen to like it. You know? Okay, so that was the major one I wanted to talk about today. And I guess, you know what? To finish off with Got Fuzz. I think he made one little short thing, and I think it'll summarize this section of the stream. A Christian living like a Christian will not, and does not have the power to convert a dead man to life. There's no one who sees how we live and will be regenerated by it. Only by the preaching of the gospel of Christ are men saved. Amen. And that's what our main focus is on. Focusing on the good of Christ's kingdom and his lordship. We can. Here we go. So, in Fault Lines, we began the first two chapters discussing Vodi Bakum sort of gave his overview of his life, his influence both from his mother as well as from Christianity to inform his way of understanding the world, and to kind of right off the top of the book to sort of explain himself to his critics, who might say something like, very much like we reviewed earlier in the stream. If I could find that slander. Here it is. Yeah, Kevin Cosby was saying like, white supremacy and Vodi Bakum, they're connected, you know. It's like that's slander. It's such slander. Yeah, we used the first two chapters to kind of explain himself in regards to his experience as a Christian. And this chapter, I've been told by Regenerated, is quite a spicy one. So we shall see what it holds for us. God clearly condemns injustice. He also is clear in his condemnation of. Let me do the narrative. He is also clear in his condemnation of falsehood and lies. The most succinct statement of this is found in the Decalogue. The 9th commandment simply states, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." Exodus 20, verse 16. However, this commandment carries more weight than one can imagine. Falsehood and lies are reprehensible because they not only harm those to and or about whom they are told, but they also blaspheme the very character and nature of the God who is truth, whose very word is truth, and whose very essence is that of the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of due to change. Moreover, God is clear about his attitude toward falsehood and its implications. Quote, "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him." Hello, Liam. Welcome. Good man. Good to have you. 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, with it every time, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who spreads lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Proverbs 6, verses 16 to 19. There are falsehoods in the current cultural moment that tick every one of these boxes. As such, these falsehoods must be confronted. Colin Kaepernick. On September 1st, 2016, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel during the national anthem before his team's last preseason game to protest police violence against black people. Numerous articles lionized Kaepernick as a modern civil rights hero, claiming that he was a figurehead for a moment of NFL players protesting police killings of unarmed black Americans. Footnote: Mark Bain. Nike's Kaepernick ad is what happens when capitalism and activism collide. Quartz, September 29th, 2018. There had been several such stories in the news at the time. I always thought Kaepernick was protesting the killings of Trayvon Martin, 17, of Miami Gardens, Florida, in 2012, Michael Brown, 18, of Ferguson, Missouri, in 2014, and Tamir Rice, 12, of Cleveland, Ohio, also 2014. Mind you, even if that were the case, I did not see his protest as valid for reasons I will detail in this book. However, I was shocked and more than a little disappointed when I learned that the real flashpoint for Kaepernick was a case that had even less merit than these. In an interview with NBC News, Kaepernick explained that he was protesting a deadly December 2015 confrontation between San Francisco police officers and a 26-year-old man named Mario Woods. Footnote: David K. Lee. Colin Kaepernick reveals the specific police shooting that led him to kneel. NBC News, August 20th, 2019. The fact that Kaepernick and others saw the Woods case as a legitimate cause for protest is quite telling. Three aspects of the Mario Woods case belie the claims of Kaepernick's crusade and reveal the true fault lines that lie beneath. We hear over and over again that taking a knee during the national anthem is an act of protest against police brutality, as evidenced by the rampant hunting and killing of, quote, innocent unarmed black men, end quote. However, like several of the other black men shot and killed by police in 2020, whom we will discuss later, Woods was neither innocent nor unarmed. In fact, when confronted by the San Francisco police, Woods reached into his pocket and produced a knife, nearly 8 inches long. Footnote: San Francisco Police Department Memorandum, June 12, 2018. Second, Woods was a threat to both the police and the public. The police were responding to the reported stabbing. The victim had been taken to a nearby hospital, where he gave a description of his assailant. Police were dispatched to the scene, where they then found and confronted Woods. At that point, Woods drew his knife and refused all 5 responding officers' attempts to stop him from using it. According to a report released after a year-long internal investigation, quote, these included verbal commands, OC spray, less lethal force options including 40mm ERIW and 12-gauge ERIW beanbag rounds, end quote. None of these options achieved the desired effect. Woods continued to brandish his knife and did not surrender. One bystander, who captured the events on his phone, can be heard saying, "Drop that knife," and again, "Drop that knife, homeboy." Someone asks, "Did they shoot him?" Another responds, they're using rubber bullets. Rubber bullets. Woods was hit multiple times by these less than lethal rounds, once taking him to the ground. However, he got up and continued to threaten police and civilians. In the end, Woods continued directly towards the 5 officers facing him until he was less than 10 feet away. Only then did they open fire. This incident was tragic, to be sure. However, to cite it as an example of police brutality that warrants national protest stretches credulity, especially when that protest is characterized as a movement to raise awareness of the killing of unarmed black men. More importantly, cries for justice for Mario Woods and the ensuing Kaepernick protest reveal a kind of cognitive dissonance that underlies much of the critical social justice movement. Understanding the ideology that lies at the root of this cognitive dissonance is key to recognizing the fault line it represents. Real justice requires truth. Beyond confronting falsehoods in general, our pursuit of truth must also be characterized by a pursuit... Our pursuit of justice must also be characterized by a pursuit of truth. Much has been said recently about seeking justice, and I could not agree more. However, we must be certain that we pursue justice on God's terms. For instance, we must bear in mind that a single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime or for any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. Only upon the evidence of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. Deuteronomy 19:15. Also see Matthew 18:16, 2 Corinthians 13:1, 1 Timothy 5:19, and Hebrews 10:28. This is critical in our quest to adhere to the Lord's admonition that, quote, "You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor defer to the great. But in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor." Leviticus 19:15. An excellent verse. Key to understanding justice. Just because the poor, you feel bad for the poor, doesn't mean that you should be partial to them and give them special treatment. And just because you find that you want to get in good with the great does not mean that you should defer to them. You should be fair in your justice. Justice is blind. How much of our current debate about justice is rooted in these principles? My goal, when I hear about injustices, is to bear in mind that I am biased. I am a single witness with limited information, and I carry a great deal of baggage. So, when I'm evaluating people's testimonies and pleas, and when people are shouting, "Justice for George, Ahmad, Brianna, Trayvon," or anyone else, I always want to bear in mind the words of John 7, verse 51. Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? I also want to remember that the one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes to examine him. Proverbs 18:17. Which is why, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and his shame. Proverbs 18:13. One thing to be very mindful of is the need we feel sometimes to respond to a tragedy as fast as possible and as concisely and decisively as possible. But as we see from the Holy Scriptures, that in Proverbs 18:17 and Proverbs 18:13, doing so is foolish. Today, people are rioting and demanding justice before knowing the facts, and in most cases without ever considering the aforementioned principles. And here is the key. People are ignoring these principles because the standard of justice upon which their pleas are built does not come from the God of the Scriptures. While that may be fine for others, those of us who claim to know Christ are held to a different standard. Exposing the false narrative. In a now famous tweet, NBA star LeBron James wrote, quote, "We're literally hunted every day, every time we step foot outside the comfort of our homes." Footnote, LeBron James at King James. We're literally hunted every day, every time we step outside of the comfort of our own homes. Can't even go for a damn jog, man. Like, WTF, man, are you kidding me? No, man, for real, are you kidding me? I'm sorry, Ahmad, rest in paradise, and my prayers and blessings sent to the ellipses. Twitter, May 6th, 2020. A New York Times headline proclaimed last June, quote, "Pandemic within a pandemic, coronavirus and police brutality, royal black community," end quote. The story quoted a protest organizer who said, quote, "I'm just as likely to die from a cop as I am from COVID." Footnote, Cheryl Gay Strollberg, Pandemic Within a Pandemic, Coronavirus and Police Brutality, Royal Black Communities, New York Times, June 7th, 2020. All very recent articles and ideas and footnotes here. Last couple of years. Or even a year. Not to be outdone, the Washington Post headline a story. Quote, "Police killing black people is a pandemic too," with a subheading stating, "State violence is a public health crisis," end quote. Footnote, Osage K. Obasogi, "Police killing black people is a pandemic too." Washington Post, June 5th, 2020, so a year ago. And Vox echoed the claim, citing National Academy of Sciences research that suggests, quote, "1 in every 1,000 black men and boys can expect to be killed by police in this country," end quote. Footnote, Frank Edwards, Hedwig Lee, and Michael Esposito, quote, "Risk of being killed by police use of force in the United States by age, race, ethnicity, and sex." Al Jazeera even joined the chorus with an entire website called Know Their Names, which features black men and women killed by the police, apparently regardless of the circumstances. Footnote, Aliyah Chungtai, "Know Their Names, Black people killed by the police in the US," Al Jazeera. No wonder the chairman of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York told Fox News, quote, "If this country doesn't give us what we want, we will burn down the system and replace it." Footnote, Megan Ruse, quote, "BLM leader will burn the system down if US won't give us what we want." Newsweek, June 25th, 2020. All of this stems from and perpetuates the perception that police are killing unarmed black men. And if you think I am being misogynistic by excluding women from the phrase, just do a quick web search. It's not just me. Quote, "A search of the archive reveals that NPR has used the phrase unarmed black men 82 times in the past year. 5 of those were headlines," wrote Kelly McBride in an insightful piece for the Poynter Institute. Footnote, Kelly McBride, "Unarmed black men doesn't mean what you think it means." Poynter Institute August 31st, 2020. In case you're wondering about the absence of the phrase unarmed white men, it was not due to a lack of opportunity. 11 of those who were killed by police over that 187-day span. Stephen O'Brien was killed by police in Floresville, Texas, the day after Aubrey on February 24th. Christopher Palmer was killed in Manila, Arkansas, on March 4th. Kenneth Mullins was killed in Edison, California, on March 6th. Brian Moxberry and Aaron Tolan were killed in Humble, Texas, and Wasilla, Alaska, on March 8th. John Hendrick was killed in Linwood, North Carolina, on March 26th. Zachary Gifford was killed in Brandon, Colorado, on April 9th. Giuseppe Partisanone was killed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on April 10th. Nicholas Bills was killed in San Diego, California, on May 1st. Tyler Hayes was killed in Sale Creek, Tennessee, on May 19th. And Jeffrey Stott Harzman was killed in St. Petersburg, Florida, on August 7th. But you didn't hear any of these names before, did you? By the way, please don't miss the fact that while police killed these unarmed white men, they did not kill Aubrey. Aubrey's murder would fall under another category that people would rather forget: interracial violence. I'll say more on that later. The high cost of false narratives. On the morning of October 5th, 2016, a female officer in Chicago was nearly beaten to death because she was afraid to use her weapon. Quote, "She thought she was going to die," the superintendent told reporters the next day. "She knew that she should shoot this guy, but she chose not to because she didn't want her family or the department to have to go through the scrutiny the next day on national news." End quote. Footnote: Chicago police officer says she feared using gun while being beaten. ABC News, October 6th, 2016. Oh yes, I skipped the part here. This is just one example of how false narratives cost our society. There is one statistic underlying most of these narratives. Quote, "The police are 2.5 times more likely to shoot and kill a black man than a white man. If you are like me," end quote. "If you are like me, you have heard this number cited in sermons, read it in articles and blogs, and seen it in headlines everywhere where you look. At first blush, it seems to make sense. More white people are killed by police, both armed and unarmed, but black people make up only 13% of the population, so that ratio matters, right? Maybe. I am not a mathematician. However, I did take and pass statistics in college. It almost killed me, but I got through it. And one thing I took away from that experience is the maxim: correlation is not causation. I have been reminded of this almost daily in recent years, as I have been bombarded with statistics, but particularly with the oft-repeated 2.5 to 1 ratio. The implication is that this stat proves systematic racism. Whenever you hear this mantra, I hope you remember Proverbs 18:17. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes to question him. And this one who states his case must be examined in light of 1. The nature of the claim itself, 2. The individual cases that are frequently cited as evidence of the claim's veracity, and 3. the inconvenient truth about interracial violence in America. When we examine the 2.5 to 1 stat in these ways, we discover it does not hold up. Extensive research. The best research on the topic of fatal officer-involved shootings, or FOIs, has been clear, as were the findings of Harvard economist Ronald G. Fryer Jr. in a forthcoming study. Quote, "On the most extreme use of force, or FOIs," he writes, we find no racial difference in either the raw data or when contextual factors are taken into account." End quote. Footnote, Ronald G. Fryer Jr., an empirical analysis of racial differences in police use of force. Journal of Political Economy. Fryer was actually surprised by his own findings. Meanwhile, a National Academy of Sciences study ignited controversy when its authors proclaimed, quote, "We find no evidence of anti-black or anti-Hispanic disparities across shootings, and white officers are not more likely to shoot minority civilians than non-white officers." Footnote, David J. Johnson, Trevor Tress, Nicole Burkell, Carly Taylor, and Joseph Cesario. Officer Characteristics and Racial Disparities in Fatal Officer-Involved Shootings. Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, page 116, number 32, August 16th, 2019. First published on July 22nd, 2019. Their study was attacked immediately as being racist. One researcher was demoted from his position at Michigan State University for citing it. For citing it! Just for citing it. Eventually, the authors retracted the study, though it was peer-reviewed and they still stand behind their findings. Moreover, the findings mirror those of a similar study done in 2015. In other words, the 2.5 to 1 ratio taken at face value is actually misleading. So, what is the answer? If we shouldn't rely on a univariate analysis of FOIs, what should we do? The National Academy of Sciences points out that criminologists have known the answer to this question for some time. Quote, "Researchers have attempted to avoid this issue by using race-specific violent crime as a benchmark, as the majority of FOIs involve armed civilians." End quote. Footnote, same as previous. Perhaps most astonishing is the discovery that, quote, "When violent crime is used as a benchmark, anti-black disparities in FOIs disappear or even reverse." End quote. Footnote, same as previous. In other words, it is white people who are actually shot at disproportionately high rates when the number of interactions with police is tallied up. The idea of racial motivation being a factor in these shootings is further contradicted by Fryer's findings that, quote, "For white officers, the probability that a white suspect who is involved in officer-involved shooting has a weapon probability that a white suspect who is involved in officer-involved shooting and has a weapon is 84.2%. The equivalent probability for blacks is 80.9%. A difference of 4%, which is not... difference of 4%, which is not statistically... This is a very hard word for me to say. I apologize. Which is not statistically significant. For black officers, the probability that a white suspect who is involved in an officer-involved shooting and has a weapon is surprisingly lower, 57.1%. The equivalent probability for black suspects is 73%. The only statistically significant differences by race demonstrate that black officers are more likely to shoot unarmed whites, relative to white officers. Footnote: Fryer, an empirical analysis of racial differences in police use of force. It must be noted that these findings and others have been attacked as biased, inaccurate, and downright racist. However, they remain the best work on the topic. But there is a more fundamental problem with the 2.5-to-1 ratio. If we apply the same logic across the board, we find systematic injustice in police shootings based on sex, age, geographic region, population, and a host of other factors. Consider two obvious and clear examples: sex and age. Example 1. Men versus women. According to a database maintained by the Washington Post, 96% of the 5,542 people killed by police since 2015 were men. 96%. If we use the same logic that's employed by those who claim the black-white shooting stats prove racial bias, wouldn't we then have to also conclude that the overwhelming disparity in the male-female stats provides misandry? Not misogyny, but misandry? Of course, no one is making that claim. But why? Well, because in this case, we readily admit that a univariate analysis is inadequate to explain this disparity. We also know that the majority of violent crimes are done by males, which is the top predicator of violent interactions with police. Footnote: John Falk, Marta Wallenus, Sebastian Lodstrom, Thomas Friesel, Henrik Ankar Satter, and Nora Kerekers. The 1% of the population accountable for 63% of all violent crime convictions. Social psychiatry, and epidemiology. 49 number 4, published online October 31st, 2013. Example 2. Another example that proves this point is the disparity in the age of people killed by police. The age breakdown of the US population is as follows: under 18, 74.2 million, or 24%. 18 to 44, 112.8 million, or 36.5%. Over 44 years of age, 121 million, or 39.4%. However, the stats on Americans killed by police don't match up. Of the 5,542 people killed by police since 2015, 101, 2%, were under the age of 18. 2,736, or 49%, were between the ages of 18 and 44, and 1,454, or 26%, were over the age of 44. Now note that both the young and the old are underrepresented relative to their population stats. Right. Because under 18, 24% of the people in America are under the age of 18, but they represent 2% of those who were killed by police. And then people who are ages 18 and 44, they represent 36.5% of the population, but they make up 49% of all people killed by police, and so on. So note that both the young and the old stats are underrepresented relative to their population stats, and those in the middle are overrepresented. Is this prima facie? Is this prima facie evidence of age discrimination, or is it a function of something else? Quote, the relationship between aging and criminal activity has been noted since the beginnings of criminology, noted Jeffrey T. Ulmer and Daryl Steffensmeyer in their paper, The Age of Crime and Relationship. Footnote, Jeffrey Todd Ulmer and Daryl J. Steffenheimer, The Age and Crime Relationship, social variation and social explanations, in the nurture versus biosocial debate in criminology, on the origins of criminal behavior and criminality. Age is a consistent predictor of crime, both in the aggregate and for individuals. And guess which of the three age groups is overrepresented in committing violent crime? As we just said, the 18 to 44-year-olds. The relationship of these variables is even more pronounced when looking at those killed while unarmed. Of the 355 unarmed people killed by police since 2015, the age breakdown was as follows. Under 18, 14, or 4%. 18 to 44, 292, or 82%. Over 44, 44, or 12%. In other words, in terms of representation by age, 36.5% of the population accounts for 82% of those killed by police while unarmed. And so what he's getting at in saying, in looking at all these numbers, is to debunk the idea that, oh, well, black people are killed disproportionately to white people. And it's like, well, if you actually take the numbers and use that argument, you can say that, well, you know, certain age groups are also being discriminated against because they, you know, 36.5% of this population account for 82% of those killed by police. But we never hear arguments about, oh, well, they're being ageist, right? You know, 96% of everyone killed by police since 2015 were men. But you never hear arguments about, oh, well, they're being misandrist. Misandrist? It's because there's more going on than just the flat statistic. Bonus: the killing of police. One factor that should give pause to those who rely on the 2.5 to 1 ratio trope is related to the killing of police by civilians. A 2015 Washington Post analysis found that, quote, 511 officers were killed in felonious incidents and 540 offenders from 2004 to 2013. Among the total offenders, 52% were white and 43% were black. Footnote: Michelle Yi-Hee Lee, are black or white offenders more likely to kill police? Washington Post fact-checker analysis, January 9th, 2015. Ambush killings of officers were nearly evenly split racially. There were, quote, 304 officers killed in ambush attacks from 1980 to 2013, with 371 offenders involved in those deaths. The percentage of black and white offenders in ambushes were about the same. 44% were white and 43% were black. Footnote, same as previous. Remember, blacks represent approximately 13% of the population and 23.6% of the FOIS cases in the Washington Post database, compared to whites at 60% of the population and 45.3% of the FOIS. And FOIS, again, is fatal officer involved shootings. The argument is that the overrepresentation of blacks in the FOIS data is prima facie evidence of racist police brutality. So prima facie means, I think it means like on its face, just like straightforwardly. Let me just confirm that. I'm pretty sure it's what it means. Yeah. At first sight, upon before closer inspection, authentic and true, and adequate at first sight. Yeah. But anyone who takes that position will find it difficult to escape the implication of these numbers related to the killing of police. Simply put, we must be careful when we hear and or draw conclusions. We must reject simplistic univariate analyses as a basis for sweeping accusations of bias. The 2.5 to 1 stat is an example of the aforementioned single witness being allowed to establish a charge. It is as inappropriate to use that stat to prove police bias as it is to use the stats on the killings of police to prove inherent bias in black people. But what about the cases themselves? Do they prove the case for racial injustice? The unique nature of individual cases. Many argue that the ways in which black people have been killed by police sets them apart, and along with the other witness of statistical disparity, more than establishes the case. Here again, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and questions him. And so we must examine this witness, since if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and his shame. Proverbs 18:13. Space limitations require me to be selective and brief, which will undeniably open me up to charges of bias, as though my opponents in this debate need an excuse for that. Nevertheless, my goal here is not to adjudicate these cases, but merely to demonstrate the fact that the way they have been covered by the media is insufficient, slanted, and unjust in terms of the accusations they are used to levy. That being said, I have chosen cases that are recent, well-known, and have generated and maintained a great deal of public outcry. Here we go. George Floyd. Many view the now ubiquitous George Floyd case as the part that represents the totality of police killings of unarmed black men. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, in response to Floyd's death, said, quote, "Being black in America should not be a death sentence," end quote. Others in the Christian camp made it clear that the Floyd case was the smoking gun in the question of racial injustice. Quote, "If you are a Christian leader and you remain silent on racial injustice, I don't know why you are even in ministry," end quote. Tweeted Eric Mason, pastor of Epiphany Fellowship in Philadelphia and author of the book Woke Church, on May 27th. Then, assuming the posture of a social media watchdog, he continued, quote, "I've peeked at some of your timelines. There are posts, but not about these matters. I haven't been able to focus on much at all since I saw the horrific video of George Floyd's murder," end quote. Wrote pastor and Christian hip-hop artist Shay Lynn in an article for the Gospel Coalition's website. Then, making the clear connection between Floyd and every other case, regardless of merit or circumstances, he continued, "But it's not just the video of this one incident. For many black people, it's never about just one incident." Footnote: Shay Lynn, George Floyd and Me, Gospel Coalition, June 8th, 2020. Space does not permit me to go on. Suffice to say, the idea of the Floyd case as the part of that represents the whole is almost universal. But is that accurate? Was George Floyd's killing unique? Was it evidence of a particular callousness toward black men on the part of the police? Oh boy, I can't. This is good that he's mentioning this. This is good right here. Have you heard of Tony Timpa? You probably haven't, but it's really insightful. That's really good. Like Floyd, quote, "Timpa wailed and pleaded for help more than 30 times as officers pinned his shoulders and knees and neck to the ground." Footnote: Carrie Aspinwall and Dave Boucher. "You're gonna kill me!" Dallas police body cam footage reveals the final minutes of Tony Timpa's life. Dallas Morning News, July 30th, 2019. This was reported in Dallas Morning News in August 2016. Timpa, a 32-year-old schizophrenic, called the police himself, saying he was off his meds and needed help. When police arrived, Timpa had already been handcuffed by a security guard. 3 Dallas Police Department officers restrained Timpa for nearly 14 minutes as he continually pleaded, "You're gonna kill me, you're gonna kill me, you're gonna kill me." Eventually, Timpa went limp, at which time the officers mocked him and made jokes about it. In the end, when the paramedics finally came and put Timpa's flaccid body on a stretcher, one officer said, "I hope we didn't kill him." But they had. On Dallas Morning News, quote, first reported Timpa's death in a 2017 investigation that showed police refused to say how a man who had called 911 for help ended up dead. Footnote, Aspinwall and Boucher, they're going to kill me. Dallas police body cam footage reveals the final minutes of Tony Timpa's life. Yeah, I mean, this is something that never talks about. And I mentioned this, I think, probably let's see, it's July right now. Probably 8 months ago. I was like, yeah, there's a story of Tony Timpa, and it's it's very similar to George Floyd, which is why it gets brought up in these discussions, because it's a very similar incident, but no one cared because he was white, you know, or you could say because he was white or because it wasn't politically expedient, you know. There's some reason as to why this did not make national news, you know. The officers were still on duty at the time, and no disciplinary action had been taken. In fact, DPD refused to release body cam footage that was only done after a 3-year legal battle. A side-by-side comparison of the Timpa Floyd cases is very telling. And right here, he actually has a footnote, or a chart. I'll read the chart for you guys. So we have, maybe I'll just go across the rows here. So we have year 2020, George Floyd, and then Tony Timpa 2016. You have circumstances leading to a police encounter, George Floyd, police called in response to passing counterfeit bills. Tony Timpa called the police himself and asked for help. Type of restraint, George Floyd has knee on neck. Tony Timpa has knee and hands on back and neck. Length of restraint, about 8 minutes, just under 9 minutes. Tony Timpa, about 14 minutes. Officer reaction to unresponsiveness, George Floyd, none, no reaction. Tony Timpa, mockery and laughter and saying, "Is he dead?" Legal response, George Floyd, all officers arrested and charged. Legal response to Tony Timpa, officers neither arrested nor charged, and footage is withheld for 3 years. Media and public response to George Floyd. Multiple funerals, congressional recognition, police reforms, name on everyone's lips, nationwide protests and riots. Response to Tony Timpa, no one knew his name, and few ever heard about the case. The George Floyd case was indeed tragic. However, it was not unique, nor does it represent clear evidence of a particular pattern of police brutality regarding black men. No one took to Twitter demanding that Christian leaders prove their bona fides by speaking out on the Timpa case, and no one wrote articles in leading Christian publications about losing sleep about it. In fact, few, if any, of the people who mounted their moral high horses and took to the streets in protest over George Floyd even knew Tony Timpa's name. Why is that? Because he was white, and his case did not advance the right narrative. Tamir Rice. On November 22nd, 2014, Cleveland police received a call about someone in a park with a gun. One report notes that, quote, because of multiple layers in Cleveland's 911 system, crucial information from the initial call about, quote, a guy in here with a pistol, end quote, was never relayed to the responding police officers, including the caller's caveats that the gun was, quote, probably fake, end quote, and that the wielder was probably a juvenile. Footnote, Shayla Dewan and Richard A. Oppel Jr. In Tamir Rice case, many errors by Cleveland police, then a fatal one. New York Times, January 22nd, 2015. Upon arrival, the officers drove up to the gazebo where Rice was playing with his gun, and as he walked toward them, Lohman exited the car. Oh, sorry, I skipped the section. No one knows if that information would have made a difference. What we do know is that what the officers, Frank Garback and his rookie partner, Tim Lohman, did hear from a dispatcher was, "We have a code 1, which is the department's highest level of urgency." Upon arrival, the officers drove up to the gazebo where Rice was playing with his gun, and as he walked toward them, Lohman exited the car, weapon drawn, and shot the boy in the abdomen. This case was tragic. However, despite the claim that little black boys can't play with toy guns, or that only a black kid with a gun would be looked upon as a threat, the Tamir Rice case is not unique. In 2016, the Washington Post... I know, it's unbelievable, right? And this actually goes to a whole thing about, like I'm actually for police reform in a certain sense, right? It's like, police should not be so quick to shoot people, you know? So here it's talking about how, like, there was a break in the chain of information, and so it's like, I think as a police officer, you have to be willing to get shot at, before shooting first, you know? But we have to kind of take that at a case-by-case basis. So, the Tamir Rice case is not unique. In 2016, the Washington Post ran an article under the headline, "In 2 years, police killed 86 people brandishing guns that look real, but weren't." Of those killed, 81 of the 86 were men, 5 were women, 54 were white, and 19 were black. 4 of the 86 were under the age of 17. While none of this changes the tragedy of what happened to Tamir Rice, it does make it hard to argue from this point that it was particularly or uniquely heinous and motivated by race. Yeah. So, again, we have to take all the data in consideration, right? 86 people is too many, like, that brandishing guns that look real but aren't. And so you can't use the Tamir Rice situation to say, they're hunting black people. And it's like, well, doesn't seem like it based on the tragedies that we see with cops being a little too scared that they're going to be shot. There's nothing wrong with defending yourself, but there's a certain sense in which, like, you should be an officer knowing that you are so dedicated to ensuring that innocent people do not get shot that you're willing to get shot at first, you know? That's sort of, I think, more in line with the principles of the justice system, right? Philando Castile. On July 6th, 2016, 32-year-old Philando Castile was shot dead in his car during a traffic stop. According to police transcripts, after being asked for his license and registration, Castile, who had a permit to carry a concealed weapon, told Officer Geronimo Yanez, "Sir, I have to tell you, I have a firearm on me." Yanez replied, "Don't reach for it then." And Castile said, I was reaching for... Yanez said, "Don't pull it out." Castile replied, "I'm not pulling it out," at which point his girlfriend said he's not. Yanez repeated, "Don't pull it out," at which point the transcript simply reads, "gunshots." And that's a footnote. Transcript of Philando Castile traffic stop, Ramsey County website, July 6, 2016. Yanez fired 7 times, hitting Castile with 5 shots. Castile's 4-year-old daughter was in the back seat. So tragic. I remember this case vividly because it shook me, especially as I viewed it through the lens of history, social media, and my own personal anxiety. This wasn't the racist Deep South. This was Minnesota. Not to mention the fact that I have a license to carry and have had to disclose the fact that I was armed to an officer who has pulled me over. However, as I stepped back to look at this issue through a different lens, I had to admit that the Flanders Castile case, though tragic as well, was also not unique. That same summer, on June 25th, Dylan Noble was killed by police in Fresno, California, under very similar circumstances. He was stopped by police, reached into his waistband, and was shot 11 times. Again, you don't know Dylan's name because he was white. Nor are you likely to know the name of 6-year-old Jeremy Martis. In November 2015, I actually don't know either of these names. In November 2015, he was killed when police in Louisiana opened fire on his father after he led them on a 2-mile car chase. Wow. Jeremy, a first grader, was, quote, shot several times in the head and torso and pronounced dead at the scene. Footnote, Brian Stoll, authorities try to sort out details of Marshall-involved Marksville shooting that left child dead, father wounded. Acadian Advocate, November 10th, 2015. See, his point... like, the point he's trying to make here is not that, oh, Fernando Castile got shot, so what, right? It's just to say, well, you can't use that as an argument to say, and therefore black people are being hunted down. When it's like, well, there are other cases that are very similar, where people are tragically shot by trigger-happy police, right? Saria Lane of Phoenix, Arizona was just 17 when she was shot and killed by police on April 20th, 2017. Her only mistake, according to news reports, was taking a ride with her boyfriend in a car driven by a felon, 25-year-old Brandon Pacino. As officers tried to arrest Pacino, they thought he tried to reach for a gun. However, Pacino didn't have one in the end. 3 Mesa police officers unloaded 11 shots into the car, killing both Pacino and Lane, who were sitting in the back seat. Footnote, recent police shootings raise questions about use of deadly force. Fox 10 News, October 30th, 2017. Even worse, all 3 of the officers who opened fire on Lane sported long histories of officer-involved shootings. One had 2, one had 5, and one had 7. Now, just try to imagine the outrage if either Pacino or Lane had been black. Unfortunately for them, neither was. Michael Brown. Now, this one is the one I've heard of. I've heard of this name. Rather than describe the Michael Brown case, I offer this succinct summary of the findings from the U.S. Department of Justice's investigation. Let's see. Quote, there was no evidence to contradict Officer Darren Wilson's claim that Brown reached for his gun. The investigation concluded that Wilson did not shoot Brown in the back, that he did not shoot Brown as he was running away, that Brown did stop and turn toward Wilson, that in those next moments, several witnesses stated that Brown appeared to pose a physical threat to Wilson. The claims that Brown had his hands up in an ambiguous sign of surrender are not supported by the physical and forensic evidence, and are sometimes materially inconsistent with that witness's own prior statements, with no explanation, credible or otherwise, as to why these accounts changed over time. Footnote, or end quote, footnote, Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Gangsters of Ferguson, The Atlantic, March 5th, 2015. Now, you may be inclined to think the summary came from the pen of some white conservative alt-right white supremacist. You would be wrong. It came from the pen of Ta-Nehisi Coates, one of the paragons of the critical social justice movement. Michael Brown never said, "Hands up, don't shoot." That was a bald-faced lie told by one of the witnesses who later admitted as much. Really? Interesting. Don't miss the last line of Coates' recap. Quote, claims that Brown had his hands up in an unambiguous sign of surrender are not supported by the physical and forensic evidence, and are sometimes materially inconsistent with that witness's own prior statements, with no explanation, credible or otherwise, as to why these accounts changed over time. End quote. By comparison, "Hands up, don't shoot" was uttered by... Oh boy, here's another sad case. I know about this one too. It was uttered by Daniel Shaver. And it was caught on video, no less. Shaver, a white man who had been waving a pellet gun out of a motel window, was by that time unarmed and attempting to comply with conflicting and confusing police commands when an officer told him, "If you do that again, we'll shoot you." And we actually, I think even Yoshi, I think he was even here for this, this situation. We actually showed the video on this very stream, like, probably like 7 months ago. I mean, no, probably closer to 9 months ago now. It was the case of the guy in the hallway, and the SWAT team, or the cops were like giving him different commands, right? Like, you're like, lay on your belly and like crawl toward us with your hands in front of you, but also with your hands up, right? And the guy was trying to comply, and was giving different instructions. And it's a tragic video because you witness a guy get shot to death, right? All because these cops, multiple cops in that hallway, all had guns trained on him. It's not as if they were in a position where they had to they were scared that they might get shot and they might, like, what if he has a gun and he gets the jump on us? No, it's like he was surrendering, right? And the great tragedy is that it's immoral it's unjust and immoral. It's murder to kill someone when they're surrendering. Because it's not the job that's vigilantism, right? Even in our fiction, we understand that there's something wrong with killing people who surrender. So let's see. The officer told him, "If you do that again, we will shoot you." If you're wondering, do what again? So was Daniel Shaver. The officer's commands were unclear and at times contradictory. Shaver, on his knees with his hands in the air, said, "Please don't shoot me." And there's a footnote here. CNN, unarmed man begs for life, shot by police. YouTube, December 10th, 2017. But shoot him they did. Mesa, Arizona police officer Philip Brailsford was charged with second-degree murder, but later was acquitted, which is... hence, Shaver's case dispels two myths. First, that police shootings of black suspects are unique, and second, that when police kill white people, they don't get away with it. Because the narrative and the idea is like, oh well, white people defend their own, right? And it's like, well, he got away with murdering Daniel Shaver. That's what that was. Even if he had a gun, right? Let's say he pulled a gun. There were multiple people in that hallway, right? Let's say, God forbid, one of those cops got shot. The other cop would have shot him back, right? But these cops were just so high-strung. They were so concerned about getting shot themselves that they killed an innocent person. See, I've said this before, actually, during the riots and stuff. We were talking a lot about police reform during those months, because we were addressing the subject of is there value in talking about police reform? It's like, well, yes, there is, because we've lost the idea that I'd rather die than kill an innocent person, right? The principle in justice system is such that you're innocent until proven guilty, right? There's assumption of innocence. And just war, the Christian view of just war, right? The Black Robe Regiment, right? They would say, God will not bless a just war. Will not bless an offensive war. Once they were shot upon, then they fired back and they would self-defense. But if you as a police officer are so terrified of being shot, which is like, it's not like a unfounded fear, right? It's like, yeah, you can get shot, and it can happen fast. But to be so quick on the trigger as to ignore someone who's surrendering, it is something to be mindful of. And I think that it has to do with just how far we've come away from the Christian way of seeing things, right? Because Christian would say, well, you know what, I don't want to get shot, obviously, but, you know, if I do die, I know, you know, where I'm going, and the Lord will take care of me, right? But the one thing I can't do is kill somebody, because I'm more concerned about my well-being than the well-being of this potentially innocent person, right? And so our humanist way of seeing the world and culture has actually impacted even the way that police view other people, with more guilt inherent in their interactions and stuff. But yeah, there is a way we can do police reform, but not necessarily in the way that the leftists want. Let's see. Where were we? Yes. Another aspect of the Michael Brown case that got a great deal of attention was his age. Much was made of the fact that Brown was 19 when he was killed. Compared that to another case, as reported by M. Live in Jackson, Mississippi. Quote, a country sheriff's sergeant suffered significant injuries during a traffic stop and fired his weapon, killing a 17-year-old Devin Guilford of Mulliken, end quote. If only Christians had a united, clear front on police reform according to Scripture. Right, yeah, if only, right? The best we can do, right, is, again, keep proclaiming the gospel and proclaiming that there is answers for these issues of justice, right? It's not a matter of us trying to figure it out on our own. We can say, well, the Puritans and the Reformers, they had a certain way of viewing human life, right? And we need to take that into account as we do our policing, and as we do our justice, right? Just as we have our courts and we have our you know, getting justice for victims and capturing criminals and stuff, right? See, this is why there was a time when being a policeman was seen as like this very high and noble thing, and you showed a lot of respect for police because you knew that these were men who went to work every day, risking their lives. Like they go into work and they go, I might die today, I might get shot today, right? And because of that, there was in our society a sort of an innate like respect, and it was a noble pursuit because you were putting your life in harm's way to protect the weak and the innocent and to serve them, right? But now, because police are a little less, they're a little more trigger happy because they're so afraid of dying, right, of getting shot. People are more suspicious of cops and government, you know, them being an arm of this, of, you know, the tyrannical state, you know. Police reform according to Scripture, Yoshi, would look more like as the former, right? Where it's like you respect police because they risk their lives and they endanger their own lives because they don't shoot first. Yeah, true facts. Yeah, it's good. All right. Like Michael Brown, Guilford was a teenage male stopped by police. A struggle ensued. The teenager was shot to death. However, you didn't know this teenager's name and probably never heard of this case. Why is that? Because Guilford was white, so his story doesn't fit the narrative. Breonna Taylor. Shortly after, I think this is the last one he's going to talk about, the last major case. Breonna Taylor. This is also a very tragic one. Shortly after midnight on March 13th, 2020, police bearing a no-knock warrant used a battering ram to enter the residence of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. According to the New York Times, Mrs. Taylor and her boyfriend Kenneth Walker had been in bed but got up when they heard a loud banging at the door. After a brief exchange, Mr. Walker fired his gun. The police also fired several shots, striking Mrs. Taylor. Footnote: Richard A. Oppel Jr., Derek Bryson Taylor, and Nicholas Bogle Burroughs. What to know about Breonna Taylor's death. New York Times, October 30th, 2020. This case captured the attention of the entire country as cries for justice for Breonna became commonplace. LeBron James devoted an entire post-game interview to raising awareness for and demanding justice in her case. And it's a footnote from Malika Kalingal and Jill Martin. LeBron James uses media interview after first scrimmage to shed light on justice for Breonna. CNN, July 24th, 2020. A lot of his sources are very recent, like in the last year or two. Some are from I haven't seen a source so far that is older than 10 years old. So this is all recent incidents and stuff. This is yet another tragic situation that is not unique. In January 2016, 12-year-old Kiara Meyer was shot and killed by Constable Clark Steele in Penn Township, Pennsylvania. The officer was serving an eviction notice on the girl's father, who produced a weapon. The officer fired at the man. The bullet passed through his arm and struck the girl instead. Wow. This is why you don't aim for the leg. You ever heard that argument? He should have aimed for the leg. He should have aimed for the arm. He should have aimed and shot the gun out of his hand. It's like this isn't Hollywood. You shoot for the arm. It goes through his arm and it hits someone from behind him. Oh. Of course, in this case, he may not have been aiming for the arm, but he happened to hit the arm, and it went through his arm. So, real life is not Hollywood. You can't shoot guns out of people's hands, and shoot people in all of the limbs. You always aim for center mass, because bullets keep going once they pass through things, right? Like even shooting a gun in the air, you shouldn't do that because the bullet will go into the air and then it comes back to Earth, right? Gravity happens. You can do it, and chances are you'll probably be fine, but it's still a risk, a certain level of risk to even doing that. The officer fired at the man. The bullet passed through his arm and struck the girl. She later died from her wounds. Footnote: Barbara Miller, Perry County DA. Investigation into the Penn Township shooting of 12-year-old continues. Penn Live, January 12th, 2016. In Taylor's case, it appears the first shots came from her boyfriend and the police responded in kind. Meyer's father did not fire on police. However, once again, this 12-year-old girl has not become a rallying point for social justice. No NFL players took a knee for her. No NBA stars used their access to the media to demand justice for Kiara. Why? Because she was white, and her story does not advance the right narrative. I think you could also potentially argue that the police it was night. Again, this is sort of like the police reform thing, right? The police had a no-knock warrant for what's his name, Kenneth Walker, and they have a no-knock warrant. It's night. They start battering ramming the door. Even if you weren't a criminal, is it not fair to respond offensively to that, not knowing the situation? Because it was a no-knock warrant, so all of a sudden the police were like, "Hey, we don't have to actually announce our presence. We just have to barge in." there is something to be said for that, I think. To be like, how do you expect someone who's innocent to respond, let alone someone who's, you know, who's a criminal or this or that, right? Even the innocent person would respond in a way that might get them shot. So, there's an interesting question there. Anticipating objections. Now, I've had several conversations with people about these cases. Inevitably, those more inclined to view things through a social justice lens will have one of several predictable objections. Two of them are nonsensical and do not deserve treatment here beyond exposing their nonsense and the underlying worldview on which it rests. The other two are worth our attention. The first nonsense idea is what I like to call the Mark Twain objection. It was he who said, "There are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics." This is the response represented by the three young black men in a Prager University video. When they heard the statistics on police killings, their immediate response was cap, which is an urban slang term meaning BS. Of course, this is a specious argument, since the same people readily accept the 2.5 to 1 stat without question. The second nonsensical objection is the social justice idea that objective scientific knowledge derived through data is white and therefore oppressive. I'll discuss more on that more in later. We went over that too last summer on this stream. Again, these same people are happy to rely on the 2.5 to 1 statistic, as well as other statistical disparities, as long as it supports their claims that America suffers from systematic racism. There are, however, two other objections worth mentioning. One is that the facts of these cases are not identical. The other is appealing to America's racist past. I am actually encouraged by the first objection, as it puts the discussion on what I consider proper ground based on biblical principles. I am more than happy to argue the merits of each of these cases. In fact, I see that as real progress. Most people hear about one of these high-profile killings of a black person and immediately jump to the facts of the case are irrelevant. To them, the number, which is insane. No Christian should ever think that way. The facts are irrelevant. To them, the number of black people killed by police is all that matters. Hence, if there are 10 shootings of unarmed black men and 9 of them are later deemed justified, that is totally irrelevant. The tally still comes up to 10 killed. The mantra remains justice for so-and-so. And the narrative marches on. So, if someone disagrees with my assessment of the dissimilarities in these cases, then we are already on proper footing. And whenever and wherever true injustice, or i.e. illegality, is found, we can join hands and advocate for justice when necessary. Yeah, absolutely. The second objection, consider America's racist history, is sometimes offered in isolation, but usually as a rebuttal once someone has been willing to look at the facts and agrees that the similarities in these cases are indeed prohibitive. Yes, that's right. Actually, I have seen this happen in real time. People have gone, the fact, like, once the facts go against like the narrative, they go, you know what, the facts don't really matter. What matters is that there's a history of this kind of thing, you know, the history of racism. And it's like, how are we gonna get to any actual justice if we just disagree? Like, we just throw away the facts of a case, you know? The objection goes like this: I see what you're saying and I agree. However, you have to consider the history of racism in this country. This asserts that the only way to judge whether or not police killings of black people are acts of racism is to look at them through the lens of racism. This is the major fault line that lies beneath the current discussion. More importantly, this is why those who do not accept, or at least understand, the underlying assumptions and presuppositions of critical social justice end up scratching their heads in bewilderment as assertions of racial injustice, or worse yet, that, quote, the police are hunting down and killing unarmed black men, end quote, become increasingly prevalent. It is imperative that we examine the worldview assumptions that underlie this division, and we shall do so. Okay. We shall do so next time. With Chapter 4. And here's where we're gonna get into wokeism, I think. A new religion. Well, that was quite a lot of stuff today, but you know, we got a lot of good conversations going. I thought covered a lot of stuff in the news today, and now I want to see. You're welcome for the. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for coming by. I want to quickly send a raid out. Let's send one to. Let's see. We did send one to Kenneth last time. Let's send one to AC. It looks like he's playing Civilization. All right. Well, thank you guys. If you can, spam the Mifuki mind blow emotes if you got them in chat. Let them know I sent you. God bless you guys. Thank you for hanging out. I'll be back. I'll be doing my game streams as well. Thanks for hanging out. Missed you. Yes, I always miss you guys too. I appreciate you guys for hanging out and taking time to learn along with me. So, all right. Well, I will see you next time, Lord willing, and maybe we'll do some game streams in the meantime as well. All right. Take care, guys.